It all kicks off on a battlefield blanketed in snow and bodies, where a lone warrior is the last one standing. Just then, an older man approaches from behind and calls him by the name Ash. He questions what the young man is doing there, since he'd entrusted him with the mission of conquering the East. The boy remains dead silent, seeming to hesitate at the question. Breaking the silence, Ash gets straight to the point. He came back just to take him out, turning around with his sword in hand. He accuses the old man of using his unit as bait from the very beginning, just to get rid of them. With his face twisted by fury and disappointment, the young man calls him father. Showing zero remorse, the patriarch confirms that was the only use for a wingless good, for nothing like his foolish son. Our hero is Ash A. Elmheim, someone who carries a heavy burden. He belongs to the House of Elmheim, a family of great military prestige. Roderick is the leader of this lineage that protects the royal family, being the only owner of the legendary 7 wings in the country. In the past, on a whim, this man rescued Ash when he was on the brink of his end in a blizzard. Because of that, the boy grew up fighting relentlessly in bloody battles. His intention was always to do whatever it took to repay the debt he owed for having his life saved. But because he didn't bear the crest of the wings, he was constantly put down by his brothers and felt he could never repay his father. The family's magical power is measured by the number of wings, and Roderick always called him useless for having none. Even so, the young man trained desperately with the sword, believing that one day all his devotion would be rewarded. At that moment, memories of the past mix with the recent betrayal on the battlefield. He finally understands the harsh reality of his situation. He remembers the exact moment his troop was ambushed in the snow and left for their demise. Back in the present, Ash questions if this betrayal is his father's answer after so many years of blind loyalty. Coldly, Roderick says that a mere tool shouldn't have expectations and tells the nuisance to get lost. A single tear traces a path down the boy's blood-streaked face, showing the weight of this rejection. With nothing left to lose, he lunges violently with his sword at his own father. As he attacks, he laments how idiotic he was for believing in him all this time. The blades clash with a force that kicks up snow everywhere. However, the old warrior just keeps a mocking expression in the face of the blow. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ash's brothers appear from behind and bind him with magical chains. Unable to defend himself from their cowardly move, he is completely immobilized and struck by both of them. The impact of the attack makes our hero spit blood as he suffers from the extreme pain. Laughing, one of the brothers says that a wingless nobody would never know his place. They gather around the fallen boy, stating that groveling on the ground is what suits him best. Agonizing in the snow, Ash asks why he was saved in the past if the intention was always to discard him in the end. But Roderick tells him to stop deluding himself, assuring him he never needed him for anything at all. Brutally, the patriarch grabs his injured son's hair and yanks his head up. Holding him in the air, he reveals that the only thing that ever mattered was the power of the 7 wings hidden inside the boy's body. Shocked by the information, the boy repeats the words, not understanding how he could have such power. The old man continues his cruel explanation, praising how truly useful Ash's mother was. He throws the boy to the ground like trash, saying she served only to give birth to a seed for his own benefit. Desperate for answers, the protagonist tries to reach for him, demanding to know what the heck he's talking about. With his last bit of strength, he screams Roderick's name, demanding an explanation as life drains from his body. Slowly, his hand falls into the snow, and he begins to feel an intense cold taking over everything. Closing his eyes, he wonders if this is where he's going to go and what the true meaning of his miserable life was. The white, silent landscape dominates his vision as the darkness of his end seems to swallow his consciousness. However, he suddenly wakes up feeling a slight warmth and realizes he's wrapped in blankets in the middle of the snow. Trying to move, he realizes he's bundled up in thick, strange clothes. Looking around, he notices everything seems too real to be just a post-demise illusion. The icy wind howls as he wonders where in the world he ended up. Lifting his own arm, he's confused to see how tiny his body is. Shocked, he realizes this isn't just a dream. He's actually turned into a newborn baby. Turning his head, he finds a woman lying in the snow beside him and wonders if she's gone. Suddenly, flashes of torches appear in the darkness, accompanied by shouts from a search party. Armed knights are scouring the area, ordering their men to find the fugitive woman at all costs. The guards claim they need to recover the stolen child for the sake of Lord Roderick. Hearing that familiar name, the protagonist's eyes widen in pure astonishment. He tries to process the information, remembering the figure of his father and trying to make sense of the situation. Slowly, he concludes that those men are actively hunting for the deceased woman's baby. Piecing together that he was also rescued on a snowy night, he considers the crazy possibility that he's gone back in time. With no time to hesitate, his tiny body begins to crawl awkwardly through the snow. With determination, he decides he'll confirm these wild theories once he's safe. Looking at the fallen woman, he knows that if he stays there, he'll fall right back into the hands of the ducal house. Using all the strength in his tiny arms, he pulls himself forward against the storm. Desperation takes over his mind, focused only on getting away from there as fast and as far as possible. One of his hands sinks into the soft snow, making it harder to move through the hostile terrain. Completely exhausted, he rests his face on the cold ground, complaining about his own heavy breathing. His limbs begin to heat up bizarrely, feeling like they're on fire. Even as he crawls miserably, leaving a trail in the snow, he swears he will survive. Heat radiates from his tiny body as his determination becomes unshakable in the face of his end. The memory of the moment he was taken out by his own father fuels his escape. With eyes glowing with anger, he promises that one day he will take Roderick's life. Seen from above, the long trail of his struggle for survival cuts through the white expanse of the forest. However, exhaustion wins, and he ends up passing out right at the feet of two mysterious people. As the blizzard subsides, a little girl calls out to her father after finding something on the ground. The noble-looking man is surprised by the scene, revealing he is from the Viscounty of Highfried. Holding the newborn baby in his arms, he wonders how a child ended up in a place like this. The nobleman holds the little one in his arms, observing the newly rescued child with great attention. Shocked, he wonders how such a young baby ended up in this freezing environment. Observing the long trail marked in the snow, the man tries to understand if the boy traveled that whole distance alone. With the newborn emitting a faint magical glow, he wonders who on earth this mysterious child is. Meanwhile, our hero's consciousness awakens in a dark, confusing space, trying to figure out where he is. Surrounded by glowing feathers falling gently around him, he realizes something unusual has come to him. Just then, the little one rubs his eyes with his tiny hands and finally wakes up in the real world. 4 children are peering at the newborn up close, super excited, telling their older sister he just opened his eyes. Getting squeezed and pulled from every direction by the little ones, the boy is completely clueless about this bizarre situation. Soon, a young woman intervenes and tries to move the little ones away to protect the baby from all the commotion. Annoyed with all the fuss, the protagonist lets out a grunt and decides to crawl far away from them. Using his small arms, he moves across the floor, totally focused on getting away. Startled by the sudden scene, one of the girls tries to get the little escapee's attention. The chase begins through the hallways, with the baby crawling at high speed while the children tell him to stop. In this moment of stress, an intense glow envelopes the protagonist's tiny body. The boy's eyes shine as he suddenly feels an absurd amount of energy coursing through his body. Like a rocket, he's launched into the air, leaving a glowing trail, and realizes with awe that this is pure magical power. However, the clumsy flight sends the baby spinning in the sky without any direction or control. Unable to master the magic, the newborn begins to plummet at high speed outside the mansion. Desperation takes over his mind as the impending collision seems inevitable. Luckily, the Viscount catches him in mid-air and comments, impressed that the child is truly strange for falling from the sky. Looking closely at the face of the man who just saved him, the boy finally recognizes him. He realizes this is Viscount Highfried, the older brother of the cruel Duke Roderick. Shocked by the discovery, the protagonist concludes that he ended up in the other branch of the Elmheim house. This man leads the Viscount family, being an extremely respected part of this lineage. In the past, Highfried and Roderick were the 2 great pillars protecting the royalty, but the boy remembers this nobleman perished in a civil war. The tragedy also resulted in the fall of the entire Viscount's family during that same dark era. Looking at his own tiny hand, the boy is absolutely certain that he really has gone back in time. Frustrated, he gripes about escaping the main house only to end up being taken in by his greatest enemy's brother. Now inside the mansion, the Viscount's wife holds the baby and comments with wonder about his magic going out of control, proving he's not ordinary. The woman shows immense affection as she caresses the newborn in her lap. She comforts the little one, assuring him the scare is over, and that he is now completely safe there with them. The protagonist blinks in surprise at such kindness, something he had never received in his past life. Beside them, the patriarch leans in to observe the child with even more attention and interest. The Viscount extends his hand and states with conviction that the boy possesses an unimaginable power. Pulling back the baby's clothes, he reveals that the mark engraved on his skin is the definitive proof of this brutal strength. The couple is amazed to see in the mirror that the red symbol represents the legendary 7 wings. Utterly shocked, the boy himself mentally questions how the heck that mark got on his body. Slowly, the pieces begin to fall into place in the protagonist's troubled mind. He recalls Roderick's old, cruel words about the need for that hidden power, finally understanding the truth. The memory of the final humiliation at the old man's hands comes back with full, painful force. It becomes clear that the Duke only rescued him in that blizzard to steal his magic in the future. Furious, the boy realizes the hypocrisy of being called useless his whole life, when his own father had been the one to rip his wings away. Returning to the present, the wife looks apprehensively at her husband, awaiting a final decision. The man maintains a rigid posture, reflecting on what fate they should give this powerful child. Knowing the danger, the little one decides he cannot let this power fall into the hands of the main house under any circumstances. Clenching his fists tightly, he vows to use these newly discovered 7 wings to secure his revenge against Roderick. Surprising everyone, the kind Viscount announces that he will take in and adopt the boy as his own son. The boy looks up, completely dumbfounded by the nobleman's sudden generosity. With a gentle movement, the man brings his hand to the child's head with enormous affection. He caresses Ash's hair, commenting that the baby is still just a fledgling, unable to fly on his own in the world. The patriarch promises to take on the responsibility of raising him until the day the boy decides to take flight on his own. The protagonist's eyes overflow with emotion at such comforting and sincere words. Suddenly, the bedroom door bursts open, with the other children tumbling into the room. The mother turns to the little intruders and asks if they were eavesdropping on the whole conversation. In chorus, the siblings sheepishly confess they were just worried about the newborn's well-being. Very agitated, the children get the woman's attention as they point curiously at the baby. Excited, the whole family gathers around, wanting to know what the new little brother's definitive name will be. The wife looks reflectively at the window, thinking with great affection about the perfect choice. Lifting the baby against the moonlight, the Viscount christens him Aster, marking the birth of a new star in the Highfried family. A decade passes quickly, revealing a peaceful and prosperous routine on the grand estate of the Viscounty. At the castle entrance, the servants give a respectful bow and welcome the return of Lord Highfried. Firm footsteps suddenly echo through the luxurious halls of the mansion, indicating the approach of someone important. A young Aster appears, walking with great confidence and elegance, dressed in his impeccable noble attire. Upon meeting his older sister on the stairs, he gently extends his hand and tells her to be careful on the steps. Happy with his gesture, Alfin accepts the help, highlighting the strong connection and companionship between the two siblings. They continue walking side by side through the courtyard in a very pleasant and relaxed atmosphere. Outside, a carriage awaits to take them to the famous annual assembly of the nobility. The gathering brings together the martial houses to strengthen political ties and serves as a stage for the young to show off their combat skills. Arriving at the grand hall of the event, the invited nobles are already starting to mingle. The Highfried family crosses through the main doors together, immediately drawing the attention of everyone around. Vicious whispers fill the air as the nobles mock the Viscount's old decision to adopt some unknown kid. The shadows gossip with contempt, questioning how long that family will continue to tarnish the lineage's reputation with their choices. Hearing the discreet insults behind his back, Aster observes the crowd and concludes that this is where the true dregs of society have gathered. Noticing the tense atmosphere, his sister worriedly asks him not to let those idiotic offenses get to him. Clenching his fist tightly, the protagonist knows that showing any kind of weakness in this place is asking to be crushed. He stands firm beside his sister, prepared to deal with the pressure and the dirty looks from the nobility. Observing the situation, the Viscount comments directly that this is their family's true position right now. The nobleman points to the enormous castle ahead and confesses he made a point of bringing the boy here to witness this reality. Staring at the imposing structure, Aster hears his father ask if this hostile reception has left him disappointed. Without hesitation, the young man assures him it hasn't and states that this icy atmosphere is exactly what suits him. Satisfied with his son's confident response, Highfried lets out a laugh and says that's comforting to hear. At that moment, the boy recalls that in his past life, he had the worst possible debut in this very same bloody tournament. However, he reflects that things have completely changed now that he has regained the brutal power of the 7 wings. Confidence takes over his mind, completely focused on rewriting his own story. Together, the 3 of them continue walking through the courtyard toward the main event that awaits them. Meanwhile, 2 young men watch the family's arrival with great interest through the castle windows. Determined, the protagonist maintains his unshakable posture in the face of the challenge to come. Setting the stage, the patriarch takes the lead and invites everyone to enter at once. The boy silently agrees, deciding he will make a high society debut that is simply dazzling. Inside the gigantic arena, the atmosphere is electric, with the tournament marking the era when knights ruled the world. To survive in this unforgiving environment, any warrior needed to perfectly master both raw power and grace. The clash between competitors shows that true strength has always boiled down to pure skill with a blade. Magical blows explode across the courtyard, proving that combat dexterity was the only path to fame. The audience cheers for the fast-paced clashes as fighters trade intense attacks from all sides. Slicing through the air with precise movements, energy envelops the knights in a truly lethal dance. But in the end, there was only one thing that could prove someone possessed both of these absolute qualities. Magic overflows from their bodies in the heat of battle, revealing the true differentiator of elite warriors. The ultimate symbol of all this unquestionable supremacy has always been the legendary crest of the wings. An intense light shines on a combatant's hand, proudly displaying the mark that defines the strongest in the kingdom. Watching all this from the balcony, Aster is impressed and comments on how absurdly violent this place is. The girl agrees and says that it was precisely because of all this brutality that the other sisters refused to come. The protagonist remains in complete silence, absorbing the heavy atmosphere of the environment around him. In the main courtyard, a competitor falls to the ground, defeated by the absolute superiority of his opponent. Noticing her brother's quietness, Alphen turns curiously and calls his name to check if he's okay. The girl asks if Aster is nervous, remembering that this is his first sword dance festival. Being completely honest, the boy assures her he's not the least bit worried and confesses that he even feels a certain nostalgia. Hearing this unusual response, Alphen is left confused about why he would feel that way. Just then, Hyfried says he's stepping away for a meeting and asks her to take good care of her younger brother. All excited, the young woman assures her father that she's much more capable than the rookie, since her other sister is too clumsy. Before leaving, the Viscount alerts the boy that there are many young people his age around, advising him to make some connections. But the tone turns serious when the patriarch warns him not to let anyone discover the secret about the Seven Wings. The man walks away through the hall's corridors as the protagonist reflects on the order he just received. However, a single glance around is enough to notice the shadowy silhouettes of the other nobles staring at them with pure hatred. Faced with such blatant hostility, the boy scratches his head, wondering how the heck he's supposed to make connections here. Suddenly, his gaze catches something specific in the midst of that unpleasant crowd. Without a word, he starts walking down the stairs alone, leaving his sister confused, asking where he's going. With the utmost naturalness, Aster replies over his shoulder that he's going to make new friends. He walks straight to the center of the courtyard, where a group of young nobles is casually gathered. Noticing his approach, a red-haired boy mockingly asks who the heck the intruder is. Ignoring the hostility, the boy introduces himself politely, calling the other boy brother-in-law Darius. He makes a point of using the full name of the main lineage, claiming to be his little brother. Maintaining his cynical posture, Aster comments that he saw him from afar and decided to come say hi. Sprawled on the ground, the other noble tells his brother that he's just the adopted kid the Viscount's family picked up. Understanding the situation, Darius bursts out laughing and mocks the rookie's courage for using the family initial. Staring at the two of them, the protagonist remembers that these are the legitimate heirs who took him out in his past life. In the past, the mere presence of this duo was enough to leave him completely terrified. However, analyzing the scene now, he realizes they're just a bunch of brats trying to act like adults. Just then, Alphen's tenseness breaks her brother's concentration. The girl grabs his arm, trying to pull him back, arguing that the greeting has been made. Noticing her presence, the hare shifts his focus and mockingly asks if the young lady came too. He provokes her without mercy, questioning if she won't need to hide behind her father today. Demanding obedience, Darius orders her to come over and entertain them, claiming it's a direct order from the main house. Furious at his audacity, Alphen immediately refuses, reminding him that there is no master-servant relationship between their families. Noticing his sister is losing her patience and moving forward, Aster tries to call her back to avoid a bigger problem. Annoyed by her response, the hare squeezes his cup and says he still has more to say. The protagonist remains perfectly calm, just listening to see where this provocation will lead. With a sadistic smile on his face, Darius asks in a mocking tone if they know an interesting detail. He starts insulting the Viscount, saying her father was a knight who couldn't even protect the king. Without holding back, the boy recalls that his own younger brother had to cut off the nobleman's arm because of it. The girl is frozen by the insult as the hare gives thanks for not having that loser's blood in his veins. Overcome with rage, Alphen screams at the coward to take back everything he just said about her family. In response, Darius throws his drink right in her face, stating he won't tolerate disrespect against his own father. The wine drips down the young woman's hair as he humiliates her, saying the Viscount only had useless daughters. Holding the empty cup, the sadist bets her father must be very disappointed, and warns her that this isn't a place for games. The young woman clutches her stained dress as she's told she should have come dressed in rags, so she wouldn't care about the mess. Watching the scene from a distance, Aster confesses in his thoughts that he was quite worried on the way to the festival. He approaches one of the hall's servants and thinks that maybe, upon seeing their faces again, he wouldn't feel angry anymore. In a sudden movement, the boy snatches the wine bottle from the servant's hands, realizing his fury is still intact. Taking charge of the situation, the protagonist stands beside his sister and declares loudly that, in the end, he's happy. To start settling the score, the protagonist calls the hare by his name and throws the wine bottle at him. Sitting comfortably, Darius catches the object in midair with ease, maintaining a very arrogant posture. Pointing the bottle back at him, the boy taunts that the rookie is still the same piece of trash as always. In a swift move, Aster smashes the bottle right over the sadist's head, drenching him in wine. Seizing the opening, the boy draws his sword and points it at the enemy's neck as his sister screams in fright. Confused by the sudden aggression, the noble touches his own bloodied face, thinking it's just grape juice. Staring down at him, the protagonist warns in a threatening tone that it suits a spoiled brat like him perfectly. Just then, memories from 3 years ago flood his mind, showing an absurd explosion of golden energy. Back then, Alphen was hugging one of her sisters who had fallen to the ground, asking if he wanted to get them taken out. Chaos reigned in the Viscount's mansion, with the children terrified by the uncontrollable fury of that magic. It was the brutal power of the Seven Wings overflowing without restraint, revealing a danger no one there had imagined. Desperate, Hyfrid drew his sword, trying to contain the boy's power and wondering if it could be controlled. With his body glowing, the boy heard his father promise that they would find a way to master the situation together. Back in the present, a guard bursts into the meeting room, running, and informs the lords that the matter is urgent. Annoyed by the sudden interruption, the Duke of the main house questions why they would barge in like that. Out of breath, the soldier reports that the sons of the main house and the branch family are engaged in a duel in the arena. Shocked by the news, Hyfrid and the Duke exchange tense glances, unable to believe what they just heard. Without wasting a moment, the Viscount runs desperately through the castle corridors to try and prevent a tragedy. Upon reaching the main balcony, Alphen runs towards her father, asking for help, while he demands to know what happened. Laughing, a bearded nobleman just points a finger to the center of the courtyard below. The entire crowd surrounds the arena, watching the tense confrontation between the two young men of the same lineage. Observing the scene with concern, the patriarch hears comments that the outcome of this fight could change everything. Beside him, a blond man watches the commotion with a very curious expression. Finding the situation amusing, the bearded man comments that this peaceful festival might end up getting very ugly. Down below, Darius raises his glowing sword and calls our hero astray for daring to challenge the ducal house. The crowd is impressed to see the boy's four-wing crest, confirming the level of a legitimate heir. With a confident smile, the sadist tells the rookie to reveal his own magical mark for everyone to see. Seeing that Aster doesn't move, his opponent mocks him, asking if he's ashamed of his own level. Maintaining a cold expression, the boy agrees that showing off like that would indeed be very humiliating. The hero is visibly irritated by his enemy's audacity and calmness in the face of such power. Taking a step forward, the sadist warns that if he wins, he'll demand an apology, but Aster retorts that if he wins, he'll make him his pet. Consumed by fury, Darius leaps forward and delivers a crushing blow towards the protagonist's head. Without showing any effort, the boy raises his blade and perfectly deflects the brutal impact. The force of the attack makes Aster slide back a bit, but he holds firm in his combat stance. Out of the corner of his eye, the young man analyzes his opponent's strength without showing the slightest hint of desperation. Engulfed in a red aura, the hare presses his weapon and claims this is the absolute power of those who possess it. A frantic sequence of blows begins, with the sadist attacking from all sides with brutality. On the castle balcony, Alphen clasps her hands and screams her brother's name in pure panic at the violence of the fight. Watching calmly, the bearded nobleman notices that the here's sword technique is still very immature. However, an explosion of energy throws them both back, proving that brute force compensates for the flowed movements. The magic of a single wing is often compared to the fragile flame of a common candle. At that moment, Darius charges forward, slicing through the wind surrounded by an intense light, showing that four wings form an explosion. Totally confident in his magical advantage, he taunts, asking where all that courage from before went. Maintaining the suffocating offensive, the boy questions if all the rookie's threats were just empty words. Raising his sword high, the enemy concentrates all his fury and demands that the adopted one show his true strength. Considering the fight over, the blonde lord cracks a wide smile, predicting a certain victory for the main house. The lethal blade descends at maximum speed to end the battle once and for all. Suddenly, a gigantic golden aura erupts from Aster's body, blocking the heavy attack instantly. The sadist's eyes widen in pure shock as he feels the absurd density of the energy against his weapon. With a smirk, the protagonist glares at his rival and tells him he's talking way too much. Using only the strength of his wrist, the boy easily parries the impact and throws his opponent backward. Dominating the center of the arena, Aster displays an imposing magic that illuminates the entire courtyard around him. He reveals that he spent 10 long years training his mana control at the Viscount's house, just for his revenge. Without giving his enemy time to breathe, the young man charges and swings his glowing blade with extreme violence. A massive shockwave hits Darius head-on, forcing the hare to retreat on the defensive. The boy's boots drag across the courtyard floor as he desperately tries not to fall from the impact. Watching the turnaround, the protagonist's other blood brother, is completely terrified by the scene. With heavy and incessant blows, Aster smashes through his opponent's guard, pushing him back further and further. The hare grits his teeth, indignant, refusing to accept that he's being pushed back despite having 4 wings. But the boy's icy expression shows that the power difference between them is simply an abyss. The nobility in the stands panics as they watch the legitimate hare being mercilessly crushed. A brutal attack sends the sadist flying into the air as spectators wonder where this monster came from. Like a golden bolt, the boy advances at an imperceptible speed, ready for the finishing blow. On the balcony, Viscount Hyfrade starts to break out in a cold sweat, realizing the situation has gotten completely out of control. Suspended in the air and covered in injuries, Darius's eyes widen, consumed by the purest terror of his end. Just then, the trauma of his path resurfaces with the disturbing image of Duke Roderick laughing in his face. Consumed by a dark hatred, Aster's energy darkens, reflecting the murderous rage he has harbored for years. Seeing the blade approach his face, the pathetic hare begs tearfully for him to stop the attack. Desperate about the impending tragedy, the patriarch shouts his son's name, pleading with him not to do something crazy. Hearing nothing, the protagonist delivers a devastating blow that slams the enemy into the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust. With his arms crossed, the bearded lord just watches the duel's conclusion with a very serious expression. Sheathing his weapon calmly, Aster lands elegantly as the smoke begins to clear in the arena. On his knees and trembling with fear, Darius hears the warning that next time he should show up in rags. Looking over his shoulder, the boy mocks his cousin, assuring him he doesn't mind getting a little dirty. Walking victoriously through the destroyed courtyard, the young man assures himself that he is no longer that wingless nobody. Alphen leans over the castle balcony, breathing a sigh of relief to see that her little brother came out of that whole mess unscathed. Satisfied with the outcome of the combat, Aster realizes that just putting that arrogant fool in his place has already made his mind feel much lighter. However, a terrifying gaze shines in the darkness, filled with pure murderous rage. An overwhelming magical pressure plummets from the balcony straight to the arena, immediately catching the boy's attention. The protagonist looks up, tense, as he feels that heavy energy and instantly recognizes the presence. High up on the stairs, the imposing figure of Duke Roderick himself appears, exuding a brutal red aura. Sweat drips down the young man's face as he stares at the cruel man who destroyed his life in the past. Around the arena, the nobles whisper in complete shock that the Viscount's son actually managed to humiliate the legitimate here. But the chatter focuses on the fact that the leader of the main family would never accept having his name dragged through the mud like that. Watching all this up close, Hyfrade swallows hard, predicting that the situation is about to spiral way out of control. Lying on the dirty ground, Darius lifts his bloodied face as he notices the approach of the absolute leader of the entire lineage. Sensing the threat, our hero remains on high alert, tracking the imposing figure walking toward him. From the top of the balcony, Roderick descends the stone steps, emanating an overwhelming power that silences everyone in the courtyard. Aware of the real danger, Aster refuses to back down and lets his own golden aura overflow from his body as a defense. With a swift and extremely heavy leap, the Duke lands hard in the center of the tournament's cracked floor. Showing no fatherly mercy, Roderick grabs his own son by the collar and lifts him off the ground like a rag. The hare cowardly points a finger at his opponent and accuses him of disrespecting the absolute authority of the main branch. Begging for help, Darius cries, asking his father to use his monstrous magic to crush the insolent adopted kid at once. But suddenly, a thick blade descends with relentless violence and pierces the boy's hand straight into the rock floor. The impact is absurd, and the coward lets out an agonizing scream of pain, feeling his own flesh torn without any warning. In the stands, the nobles panic completely, witnessing this unprovoked aggression from their own military commander. Even Aster is caught completely off guard by the old man's merciless act against his own injured blood. Staring at the boy pinned to the ground, the patriarch angrily questions how a miserable loser dares to speak with such pride in front of him. Seeing that sanity has left the building, Hyfrade shouts from the top of the castle, ordering his brother to stop this madness immediately. Ignoring the order, Roderick raises his sword, declaring that someone so weak, who can't even get revenge, loses the right to wield a weapon. The lethal blade plummets with maximum force, ready to sever the arm of the hare who failed to represent the family name. However, a blue flash cuts through the air at high speed, intercepting the deadly blow by millimeters at the last second. The thunderous clash of swords echoes through the courtyard as the Duke furiously asks what the adopted boy thinks he's doing. Firmly blocking the brutal attack, the protagonist recalls that his defeated cousin still hasn't formally apologized to his sister. Facing the monster head-on, Aster ironically asks him to save the heavy punishment for after that apology and calls him uncle. Engulfed in a dense magical aura, Roderick scoffs, questioning if the mere rescued orphan really thinks he's part of this prestigious lineage. Maintaining a tough defense, the boy retorts that he learned very well from his adoptive father about the immense pride of a knight and the weight of that name. The old warrior remains in complete silence, just staring daggers at the insolent child. Exploding with raw power, the Duke accuses his nephew of tarnishing the family's untouchable honor in a completely unnecessary way. Watching the heavy argument from a distance, one of the lords present follows the unfolding of this political crisis with great interest. Beside him, another aristocrat shakes his head, agreeing that this has gone too far and can't be forgiven as a simple squabble. Leaning on the upper balcony, the guest minister supports the king's words, stating that the adopted one must pay dearly for his audacity. In a merciless tone, the cruel patriarch recalls that in the past, the Viscount himself had to sacrifice an entire arm to atone for his failures. The pressure against the protagonist's blade increases absurdly as the old man demands to know which body part he will give up now. Without showing the slightest hint of fear, Aster lifts his head high and speaks up without abandoning family formality. The boy insists the fight was a legitimate duel, and that he only drew steel to defend his own house from the insults hurled by his cousin. Hearing that cheeky response, the great commander's face darkens, refusing to tolerate such disrespect from a subordinate. With great courage, the young man repeats the enemy's phrase about weak losers and vows firmly that he won't hand over a single finger as a prize. In the safe area, Alphen trembles with terror, clinging to her father, absolutely certain that the monster is going to finish her little brother right there. The unusual scene draws open laughter from the mocking spectator, who finds it hilarious that a 10-year-old kid would stand up to death itself like that. Faced with the child's direct audacity, Roderick's gaze darkens, becoming even more threatening and murderous than before. With a spine-chilling coldness, he gets the message and pulls his sword back, ending the contest of brute strength. Moving his heavy boots, the patriarch gets into an official combat stance and tells his nephew to prepare for a real fight. Completely caught off guard by the sudden change in attitude, the boy breaks into a cold sweat, seeing his end approaching. In the blink of an eye, the protagonist's eyes widen in fear as he sees the lightning, fast advance cutting through the air toward him. A massive explosion of absurd power devastates the center of the arena, sending huge chunks of debris flying in every direction. Completely in shock from the deafening impact, the young woman brings her hands to her mouth, fearing the worst for the youngest of the house. Consumed by uncontrollable desperation, Hyfried screams for his brother, begging for the love of all that is holy that he stops this disproportionate attack. In the midst of the fierce gust of unleashed energy, the experienced warrior just keeps his face focused and utterly lethal. Holding nothing back, the leader unleashes a sword swing so colossal it projects a horizontal shockwave capable of cracking the walls. The monstrous force of the movement rips through the stone floor, opening a huge trench that erases any trace of what was in front of it. Desperate, the adoptive father finally throws himself into the dusty arena, shouting his son's name as he searches for his small body. A massive fissure displays the trail of pure destruction, proving why that man is considered the ultimate military force of the entire empire. Viscount Hyfried freezes in fear, sweating profusely as he notes the geological damage caused by that simple warning strike. Slowly, the thin smoke dissipates, revealing Aster still standing, sliding his feet on the gravel to keep his balance on the ruined terrain. Breathing with great difficulty and bleeding from his forehead, the rookie warrior faces the monster, proving he refused to fall before the impossible. Observing this bizarre resistance, the Duke lowers his arm in a rare gesture, showing a minuscule amount of surprise at the insect's resilience. Swift as the wind, Hyfried jumps in the way, drawing his weapon in a hurry, willing to use his own life to shield the child from another blow. Tense, the man throws his head back, checking out of the corner of his eye if the boy survived that red storm without losing any limbs. Touching his adopted son's shoulder with affection, the Lord calls the boy's name, finally relieved to see the worst didn't happen in the arena. Despite showing bruises and scrapes, Aster looks up proudly, assuring him he kept his promise not to give up even a single fingernail. Absolutely amazed by the boy's divine feat, the Viscount agrees with relief, calling the child's performance something genuinely magnificent. The madness ceases, and the atmosphere becomes breathable again as the stands watch in silence the conclusion of the clash that shook high society. Breaking the uncomfortable ice, one of the guest ministers comes down the stairs, criticizing the great Duke for having such a low attitude with a newcomer. The aristocrat argues that if the kid got away with puffing out his chest for free, the main house's honor would become a joke, suggesting that the draw was the perfect outcome. Taking refuge in the darkness to catch his breath, the youngest of the lower branch immediately gains urban legend status for facing the lion and coming back in one piece. Thrilled by the top power show, the chubby lord points his finger, confessing he feared the entire clan would split in two today. With a severe wrinkle on his face, the old Roderick sheathes what's left of his patience, sensing that the current order of the system will be turned upside down very soon. The emotional and physical toll finally shuts down our hero's engine, and he collapses, exhausted, supported in the desperate arms of his united family. Staring at the calm sky, the few analysts in the audience feel that this chaotic birth foretells the beginning of a blizzard capable of shattering entire continents. In the training arena, Aster lands a heavy blow with his wooden sword, knocking his opponent to the ground. Lying on the dirty ground, the breathless soldier praises the young master's technique, stating the move was simply splendid. The protagonist stands tall with a firm posture, absorbing the exhaustion of the intense training without losing focus on the battle. Watching from a distance, two guards are startled by the brutal skill of a mere 10-year-old boy. They comment that his absurd motivation surely came after he defeated Duke Roderick's third son in that bloody festival. Slicing through the air with his sword, Aster reflects on how the main family always looked down on the Viscount's branch with total contempt. He charges forward with speed, knowing his display of power during the tournament has already shut many mouths over there. Delivering a sequence of rapid attacks, the boy is sure the jokes are over, but he knows the real barrier is still the ducal house. Landing another heavy blow in training, he admits to himself that he wanted to test his real strength to its absolute limit that day. The young man's eyes overflow with ambition, revealing his frustration at not being able to show everything he was capable of in front of that entire nobility. Blocking a thrust with ease, the harsh reality hits him hard when he recognizes that his current level is not enough to take out Roderick. Leaping high to finish the fight, our hero understands that the wing mark only shows magical capacity, and that this gift is useless without mastery. The memory of the golden explosion invades his mind, reminding him that to this day he can't access or control the full raw power of the 7 wings. Collapsing with the training blade against the soldier, he laments having to hold back his own strength all the time for fear of losing control. A spark of determination shines on his face, proving that he will find a way to master this monstrous magic, no matter the cost. The final impact shatters the wooden staff on the ground, kicking up dust all over the training courtyard. Looking around the arena covered in defeated guards, the boy demands to know loudly if there's no one left to continue the fight. At that moment, a familiar voice catches his attention, warning him that he's being too hard on the house's men. Walking calmly across the field, Alphen approaches her brother and informs him that Viscount Heifried is calling for him in the castle. Immediately, the boy obeys the order, saying he will meet with the patriarch right away. However, upon focusing entirely on the girl, Aster blinks in surprise and comments on the combat gear she's wearing. Not understanding his surprise, the young woman turns her face, confused, waiting for an explanation. Casually, he mentions it's very rare to see her in that tactical gear since she always complained the outfit wasn't cute at all. Sighing lightly, Alphen confesses that watching the brutal duel made her realize she couldn't continue being so weak and dependent. This sudden change in attitude leaves the protagonist genuinely impressed with his older sister's determination. Pointing her wooden sword with an excited smile, she guarantees that as soon as he gets back from the meeting, he'll have to train hard with her. Infected by that positive energy, the young man agrees with the idea, feeling like he's finally truly home. Walking away through the courtyard full of fallen soldiers, he asks in a playful tone for her to go easy on him during training. Arriving at the main hall of the mansion, Aster stops before the family leader's room and knocks on the heavy oak door. Politely asking for permission, our hero enters the office, illuminated by the evening light. Seated in his imposing chair, Heifried tells the boy to make himself comfortable, as the young man asks is the reason for the sudden summons. Without hesitation, Aster sits in the luxurious armchair across from his adoptive father, awaiting the start of the conversation. The Viscount recalls that a decade has passed since the rescue in the snow and confesses he planned to wait for the boy to grow older to talk about this. Just then, the nobleman pushes a small velvet box across the table, making the protagonist quite curious about the object. The case opens to reveal a sparkling ring with a red jewel set in the center, drawing all attention to itself. Staring at his son with extreme seriousness, the patriarch reveals that the ring is the definitive proof that marks the next successor of the Viscounty. The news hits Aster like a ton of bricks as he hears from the Lord's own mouth the desire for him to take full control of the family in the future. The man continues his explanation, stating that their branch is currently in a very dangerous and delicate political position. He points out that even as a lesser house, they carry the weight of the main family's name and have a gigantic territory that must be protected at all costs. With the weight of the lineage on his shoulders, the leader insists he can't leave the heir's seat empty for much longer in the face of external threats. Worried about the family's reaction, the boy directly questions if his adoptive sisters agree with this absurd decision. Sighing, Heifried informs him that girls who were at the Night Academy will return in 3 days, and that he intends to resolve this with them. The image of the two young warriors comes to the protagonist's mind, and he reflects with surprise on the imminent return of his older sisters to the mansion. Breaking into a cold sweat just imagining the scene, Aster is sure they will hate this succession story, especially the explosive sister Kudryavka. His father scratches his face, discouraged, agreeing that the girl can't stand the youngest simply because he's a boy and possesses the seven-wing miracle. Without a second thought, the boy pushes the box back across the table, rejecting the offer of succession very directly. The young man lowers his head, justifying that he still hasn't mastered his own magic, and that in the past, he almost took out his sister for being an inexperienced brat. In a very sincere tone, he confesses to the Lord that he doesn't have the slightest confidence to face his furious sisters with that ring on his finger. Amused by the boy's absurd maturity, the Viscount lets out a restrained laugh and comments that sometimes he doubts if he was ever really a child. Understanding the refusal, Hyfried pulls out a long wooden case, stating that the ring was just a prize for his performance in the tournament. Unlocking the new box, the patriarch bets that his son will be much more interested in the gift that's kept inside. The protagonist's eyes widen in total shock as he immediately recognizes the absurd relic hidden in the velvet. It is the legendary magic sword Gram, a mana-devouring weapon capable of withstanding and controlling the destructive power of the seven wings without breaking. Shortly after, the two head to an isolated clearing in the forest, where the Viscount claims it's a safe place for testing. Walking tensely, Aster asks if the mansion's gym wasn't enough, but the man assures him it's better to prevent any disaster. The memory of the boy himself destroying the castle walls during previous training proves that all this care with the location is very necessary. Holding the metallic hilt of the demonic relic, the Lord explains that the weapon is only passed down to firstborns, but that he made a vital exception. With a firm movement, the experienced knight pulls the weapon from its sheath, revealing its curious shape to the boy. Aster is completely speechless as he sees the object up close and notices an absolutely bizarre detail about the prestigious sword. Stuttering in confusion, our hero questions if that's even a weapon, since from the hilt up, there is no blade connected to it. The Viscount ignores the doubt and swings it through the air, explaining that the secret is revealed the moment mana comes into contact with the steel. A dense energy materializes from the hilt, forming a blade of pure, pulsating red magic that aggressively cuts through the air. The blast of force generated by the nobleman's simple movement creates a massive trail of destruction, tearing up the earth without any effort. The impact opens a frightening trench in the middle of the forest, felling the trees in its path as if they were mere twigs. Holding the lethal weapon firmly, the man warns that if the user's magic is weak, the sword itself will devour the person's life force until it runs dry. Dispelling the energy blade, the patriarch throws the silver hilt towards the boy, challenging him to test the dangerous equipment. In a quick reflex, the protagonist grabs the relic's hilt, feeling the historical weight that the cursed object carries. Totally focused, the boy gets into a combat stance and begins to channel his monstrous golden aura directly into the cold metal. A colossal explosion of mana overflows from the young man's body, illuminating the entire dark area of the forest, as if the sun itself had descended there. The jewel embedded in the base shines intensely as Aster panics, feeling the weapon sucking his power on its own, against his will. The force is so uncontrolled that a gigantic pillar of golden light tears through the domain skies, visible for miles. At the city's military base, soldiers are left dumbfounded by the extreme brightness, discussing whether a comet just hit the Viscount's lands. Walking through the castle's open corridors, the older sister stops in her tracks upon noticing the insane glow cutting through the clouds. With a drop of sweat running down her face, the young woman gives a tense smile, absolutely certain that all this exaggeration can only be Aster's doing. Back in the isolated forest, our hero admires the gigantic golden blade he just forged, smiling excitedly at the absurd power he can finally control. Shocked by the flash, Viscount Hyfried confesses that the most unbelievable thing of all is precisely that power. Just then, Aster's energy forms a gigantic hurricane in the sky, proving the brutal force the relic has awakened. Focused on his father's words, the boy listens as he's told that there has never been anyone with the mark of the seven wings in the entire history of Elmheim. Securing his son's future, the nobleman says that if he can completely master this magic, he will one day make history. Immediately, the imposing figure of Roderick comes to the protagonist's mind as he hears that he will surpass even the feared Duke. Changing the tone of the conversation, the Lord warns that a power too great inevitably ends up causing many conflicts. For him, the shining mark on his back is the main reason why the boy needs to hide his strength from the rest of the world. The Viscount lists the imminent dangers, warning that many will feel envy and others will try to use him or simply eliminate him. Frighteningly, the threat of his end becomes real in the young man's vision with the image of a blood-stained blade. Extending a hand to his adoptive son, Hyfried asks him to focus on not regretting being powerless in the future. As a final piece of advice, The experienced knight encourages the boy to use this time to truly strengthen himself against everything. Without a second's hesitation, Aster firmly shakes his father's hand and vows to himself that he will not live another miserable life. Filled with determination, our hero thanks him for the gift and promises to master both the 7 wings and that demonic sword. 3 days later, the entire family gathers in the main hall of the castle to welcome the new arrivals. Suddenly, the door opens, revealing Sister Kudryavka accompanied by Malfa, loudly announcing their return home. Wanting to get attention, the warrior clears her throat quite conceitedly in the middle of the castle's main hall. Opening her arms enthusiastically, Kudryavka summons her younger sisters for a warm welcome hug. However, ignoring the red-haired young woman, the girls run straight to the sweet Malfa to celebrate her return. Confused, the swordswoman is left completely hanging in the middle of the room, not understanding why she was rejected like that. Quickly, the little ones justify their refusal by saying the older one always messes up their hair during hugs. Trying to hide her embarrassment, the proud knight turns her face, assuring them that someone as refined as her would never do that. At that exact moment, the warrior's sharp gaze focuses precisely on the inattentive figure of Alphen standing near the staircase. In a perfect leap, the newcomer grabs the girl in a suffocating hug, asking if she's been a good girl. Desperate, Alphen struggles, begging her to stop as her cheeks are unceremoniously squished right there. Watching the commotion up close, the noblewoman asks her parents about Aster's whereabouts, since he's not at the reception. In response, the Viscount calmly points outside and begins to explain where the youngest of the family has gotten himself. Getting the message immediately, Kudryavka's expression darkens, showing she already knows what the boy is up to. Far away in the forest, a colossal explosion of red magic kicks up dust and destroys the ground around. Fighting against the strong wind generated by the weapon, the protagonist tries to control the relic's brutal force. Completely exhausted and sweaty, the young man grits his teeth, frustrated that he still can't master that insane flow of mana. Analyzing the unstable red energy blade, Aster admits that for now, he can only suppress the power instead of using it. Staring at the heavy weapon, he frustratedly wonders how his adoptive father managed to handle it so naturally. Just then, Kudryavka appears, walking calmly through the woods, ironically praising the boy's exaggerated flash. Noticing his sister's approach, our hero greets her and questions why she isn't at the castle getting hugs. Maintaining a very arrogant posture, the warrior mocks the rookie and comments that he's being very cold to his visitor. Leaping from a tall tree, the girl asks if he thinks he's special just because he was praised at the sword festival. Averting his tense gaze, the protagonist prefers to focus on her excellent performance in the Knight Academy missions. With that, he notices the platinum medal on his sister's shoulder, recognizing that she was the only one to receive that honor this year. Firmly gripping the hilt of her sword, the young woman states that without these merits, she could never inherit the family's position. Using a direct, accusatory tone, the swordswoman reveals that she already heard about his refusal to take over the leadership of the house. Trying to calm things down, the boy explains that he just believed he didn't have the necessary qualifications for the position. Suddenly, a metallic sound cuts through the air as the knight slowly begins to draw her blade from its sheath. Advancing slowly towards her adoptive brother, she grumbles in a hurt tone about the unacceptable cruelty of the Viscount's attitude. Ready for a clash, Kudryavka points her weapon and states that everyone knows very well what has always been the great dream of her life. Completely caught off guard by the hostility, Aster's eyes widen as he realizes the situation just got very dangerous. Without any warning, the warrior unleashes a swift vertical cut, launching a wave of blue energy at her target. Using his trained reflexes, the boy dodges the magical blade by a hair's breadth, letting the lethal blow pass right by him. With extreme brutality, the attack hits a huge tree head-on, splitting the trunk in half and sending splinters flying. Landing on the pockmarked forest floor, the protagonist demands to know the reason for that deadly attack out of nowhere. The girl just gets into a combat stance, warning that it's been a while since she tested the skills of the house's rookie. Resting the sword on her shoulders with confidence, Kudryavka warns that she won't hold back on the next blow. Terrified by the sudden madness, Aster raises the incomplete relic and begs her to stop this heavy-handed game. Relentlessly and coldly, the young woman asks if he would make the same pathetic excuse if he were facing an enemy. The word echoes heavily in the boy's mind, leaving him confused as to why he's being treated as a real threat in his own home. Teaching him a lesson the hard way, the knight warns that on the battlefield, any hesitation results in being mercilessly crushed. In a flash, the warrior charges forward, tearing through the wind, proving that her murderous intent is very real. The young man raises his weapon, desperate to block the impact, stating that he can barely control his own magical power properly. Just then, a red aura erupts from the mana, devouring sword as he realizes he needs to fight with everything he has to avoid his end. Finally, the two blades clash violently, generating intense sparks that illuminate the entire shadow of the surrounding trees. The colossal collision of force destroys the dirt ground, sending heavy stones flying in an absurdly powerful shockwave, forcing the blade with style. Kudryavka praises her brother's defensive ability against the blows she honed at the Great Academy. The boy uses all his strength to hold back the heavy impact as the bizarre instability of his magic sword threatens to give way. Pushing the weapon without mercy, his sister aggressively criticizes his absurd lack of control over his mana flow. Consequently, the continuous impact drags the protagonist backward, his boots tearing through the muddy forest soil. Breaking into a cold sweat from the overwhelming pressure, Aster remembers how merciless his older sister always was during training. Old childhood memories surface, showing the swordswoman relentlessly facing him in this same dangerous forest. In those difficult times, the young man already understood he was being persecuted simply for being the only boy with the right to succession. Holding fragile wooden swords, the girl would always display her mark on her back, thinking she was superior to anyone else there. Today, he compares her to a true, uncontrolled storm who constantly made up excuses to drag him into absurd duels. The thick dust kicks up with another heavy attack in the present, confirming his old conclusion that she is his natural enemy. Observing the boy's firm stance, the warrior praises the youngest's tenacity, proving the rivalry between them is real. In response, an eruption of red mana envelops our hero's body as he tries to level the colossal difference in strength. Completely furious with the glow, Kudryavka yells that someone as weak as him will never be worthy of leading the house. Safe in the comfort of the castle, Alphen observes the distant flash of magic and asks if her father should really leave the two of them alone. Worried by the frightening brutality of the fight, the young woman fears this sibling squabble might end with a body by the end of the day. Heifried watches the scene calmly, assuring her that the two are excellent rivals, and that all this recklessness won't end in tragedy. Alphen remains very concerned about the situation, just hoping her father is right about this. Changing the subject, she questions the real reason she was called from the academy, doubting it's just about the succession. With a much more serious posture, the Viscount agrees, closing the small box on the table. The young woman is completely shocked when she recognizes what that urgent matter is about. It is an official summons sent directly from the ruthless main family of Elmheim. Apparently, the shadowy elders who control the ducal house are demanding to see their newest grandson up close. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Alphen perfectly understands the level of danger they have on their hands. Very tense about the future, the patriarch admits that in the worst-case scenario, their family could end up losing Aster forever. Far away, the brutal battle between the siblings continues to destroy the forest with intense magical explosions. Struggling to hold the magic weapon, the boy yells that he already refused the leadership of the house and reminds his sister she heard that very well. Furious with his response, Kudryavka charges forward, stating that it's precisely this cowardly refusal that makes her so angry. She delivers a crushing blow from above, forcing our hero to withstand an absurd amount of weight on his defense. Feeling the insane impact, the protagonist compares the girl's disproportionate strength to that of a monster swinging a giant hammer. The young man's hands tremble violently as he tries his best not to let his own guard be broken. The overwhelming pressure continues to push Aster violently backward, kicking up dust. Desperate with his opponent's fury, he asks her to stop for a second and just listen to him. Totally focused on the attack, the warrior ignores his plea and accuses him of simply running away from his responsibility. A new explosion of energy throws the boy far back, breaking his defensive combat posture. Sliding across the dirt, he grumbles, impressed by the absurd brute force the knight possesses. Relentlessly, she stabs her weapon into the ground, declaring that just swinging a blade is the act of a useless warrior. Walking firmly toward him, the young woman warns that being able to control one's own magic only makes you average. According to the swordswoman, the true elite is only reached when one completely masters the path of the demonic sword. Stopping in the middle of the clearing, Kudryavka sighs, showing deep disappointment with the youngest's level. Displaying her 5 shining wings, she explains that the difference in wings multiplies strength, proving a colossal power gap. Being very direct, the girl admits her energy is totally inferior to the magical miracle the boy carries. Even with this disadvantage, his sister criticizes the fact that he continues to avoid a direct confrontation of strength against her. With a mocking smile, she questions if the rookie doesn't trust his own power to fight seriously. Hitting a nerve, the knight asks if he's terrified of losing control of his mana, like he did 3 years ago. This direct provocation hits our hero hard, making him reflect on whether he's really that afraid of the power of the 7 wings. Staring at his own unstable weapon, the protagonist realizes with a shock that he's been subconsciously putting a limiter on his energy all this time. He finally understands that the relic's failure happens precisely because he keeps suppressing his magical flow without realizing it. Cutting off his thoughts, Kudryavka charges, tearing through the air and screaming angrily that the youngest has everything she ever dreamed of. Preparing a heavy blow, she warns that if he's going to waste this brutal gift, she'll take control of everything herself. Overcome by a blind rage, the warrior plummets from the sky, demanding that her brother hand over all that absurd power to her. Sensing the real murderous intent in the attack, the boy's gaze changes, and he focuses completely on lethal survival. An apocalyptic clash of red and blue magic completely devastates the center of the clearing, pushing the trees away. For the first time in her life, the swordswoman is incredulous to see her maximum attack parried head-on. With a confident smile, the boy thanks her for the beatdown, stating that her provocations finally woke him up. Fully alert, the young woman notices with confusion that her opponent is advancing without even forging a complete magical blade. She prepares to defend, certain that his monstrous energy reserve couldn't have run out so quickly. In a swift upward movement, our hero concentrates all his hidden power into a single, extremely dense point. Knowing he can't handle using it all, he focuses on releasing the maximum lethal power for just a tiny fraction of a second. Impressed by the rookie's brilliant strategy, Kudryavka smirks, praising his raw creativity under pressure. Focused on winning, Aster vows to himself that he has no intention of wasting this second chance at life. The legendary 7 wings shine on our hero's back, proving he has decided to fully embrace this invaluable magical gift. Memories of his family surface in his mind as he reflects that, no matter how much he gained, he still felt completely empty. Hearing the youngest stray words, the warrior is quite confused about this bizarre story of a second life. Without giving her time to think, a colossal torrent of energy hits the knight's blade with extreme violence. Aster forces the lethal impact with all his might to definitively break his older sister's stubborn defense. Caught completely by surprise by the absurd offensive, Kudryavka's sword is torn from her hands and sent flying. With her opponent disarmed, the mana-devouring blade advances straight for the young woman's chest without any obstacle. Out of pure instinct, the protagonist tries his best to hold back the final blow to avoid taking out his own sister right there. The knight's eyes widen in pure terror as she sees the deadly magic so close to her frightened face. A monstrous explosion of red aura sweeps through everything, creating a blinding flash in the middle of the destroyed woods. Suddenly, silence takes over, and Kudryavka awakens with a start, lying in a comfortable, clean bed. Still dazed from the end of the battle, she looks around and recognizes she's safe inside her room at the castle. Approaching the bedside, Alphen notes with relief that her older sister has finally opened her eyes again. The young woman pulls back the curtains, letting the sunlight in, and comments that the combatant slept for a long time. Desperate, the warrior sits up in bed with a jolt, demanding to know how that insane duel in the forest ended. Casually cutting an apple, Alphen says it was Aster himself who carried her, unconscious, to the safety of the mansion. With a sweet smile, she repeats the boy's lame excuse, saying his opponent passed out from exhaustion from the trip. Clutching the bedsheet, the warrior knows perfectly well that this story about falling asleep in the middle of a fight is a blatant lie. The memory of the lethal blow returns to her mind, confirming she was absolutely certain she was going to be taken out in that instant. However, she clearly remembers the rookie dissipating all the demonic energy from the sword milliseconds before it pierced her body. Consequently, only the residual blast of magical wind hit her head-on, causing enough impact to knock her out. Immediately, the pure image of her little brother waving his hands helplessly in the past fills the defeated knight's thoughts. Analyzing the scene, she understands he would never hurt her, but admits that the murderous red aura seemed extremely real. With a very gentle smile, the proud swordswoman confesses that the adopted boy has turned into a relentless little monster. Determined to set things right, she grips the hilt of her own sword and asks where the protagonist is hiding now. Standing up with a lot of energy, the young woman declares loud and clear that she refuses to accept that humiliating defeat lying down. Cutting the mood, Alphen dryly informs her that if she wants a rematch, she'll have to wait, as our hero has already left the lands. Caught completely by surprise by the sudden news of his trip, the combatant is left speechless before her younger sister. Worried, the young woman explains that an urgent summons from the main house arrived for the boy, and he left with the Viscount in a hurry. Upon hearing the name of the cruel ducal lineage, Kudryavka's face contorts in a mix of panic and deep concern for her brother. Inside the carriage, the protagonist is indignant, claiming that no one told him about this sudden trip. The vehicle continues along the stone streets, quickly moving away from the Viscounty's lands. Observing the landscape through the window, the boy reflects on the grim fate that awaits them. Sitting across from him, Hyfried explains they are on their way to meet the old leaders who command the family from the shadows. The main lineage's castle rises on the horizon with a heavy aura of absolute authority. Worried, the Viscount doesn't understand why those elders decided to summon the boy right now. With a very serious expression, Aster deduces that the matter must be the Sword Dance Festival. The Patriarch confirms his suspicion, remembering that the family's old guard values honor far more than their own lives. People who tarnish that prestige are thrown to the wolves without any mercy. Startled by the boy's calmness, The man asks where on earth he heard such an absurd story. Without losing his cool, the young man states he's already fully prepared to face exile or even a private execution. Anguished, his adoptive father questions if he's really sure about leaving without even saying goodbye to the family. Looking down, our hero insists that this is the best thing to do under the current circumstances. He argues that his older sister hates him anyway, so she'll be able to breathe a sigh of relief without him around. Touching the hilt of his sword, the boy confesses that it was only thanks to his rivalry with Kudryavka that he learned to master the relic. Gripping the hilt firmly, Aster feels he can finally draw out the power of the 7 wings effectively. In a mature tone, he asks his father not to try to save him, vowing to survive on his own. A loud thud on the carriage roof suddenly interrupts the conversation. The boy's eyes widen, completely caught off guard by the sudden noise. Peeking upside down through the window, Kudryavka shows great excitement at finding the two of them. The vehicle keeps speeding along as the protagonist can't believe she ran all that way. Jumping inside, the warrior complains about the youngest's cruelty in running off without a single word. Heifried scolds the young woman, reminding her of the real danger involved in a visit to the main house. Sitting next to her brother, she assures him she understands the level of that threat perfectly. The swordswoman states that a summons like this means the family is in an extremely critical situation. The image of the grim castle hangs in the air, along with the fear that our hero may never return home. Trying to calm things down, Aster calmly assures them he's just going to have a quick chat with the old-timers. Pointing a finger in his face, Kudryavka changes her tone and declares in no uncertain terms that she despises him deeply. The boy blinks, confused, as he hears his sister list the reasons, like him being a man and receiving the magical miracle. She clenches her fists, indignant at how he acts like an adult when he's just her little brother. Despite all the scolding, the boy says with great affection that she is still his precious family. Completely embarrassed, the knight crosses her arms and turns her face away under the Viscount's proud gaze. Maintaining her pose, she reminds the boy he needs to come back in one piece so they can have a real rematch. Casting a determined look, the young woman vows she won't allow a victory by forfeit. Without wasting time, the combatant agilely jumps out of the moving carriage. Watching her leave, Aster wonders about the real reason for that lightning-fast visit. Caught off guard by her action, he feels immense joy and silently thanks her for the support. Waving from the illuminated road, the girl hears his promise that he will return, no matter what. Finally, the convoy arrives at the imposing gates of the immense ducal estate. The armored guards block the passage, informing them that the lord of the house is already waiting inside. Heifried tries to dismiss the guides, claiming he knows the way, but the soldier refuses, ordering an escort. The patriarch senses the hostile atmosphere and understands they weren't summoned. There is a loving part of the family. The young protagonist coldly analyzes the situation, aware that they have entered enemy territory. Staring at the sinister architecture of the place, he ironically comments on how nostalgic it is to be back. In the training courtyard, several soldiers practice heavy combat, demonstrating the clan's military strength. Walking surrounded by guards, the Viscount asks his son to remain calm, regardless of what he hears. He emphasizes that the real problem with this meeting are the people waiting for them inside. Curious, Aster looks at his adoptive father, wanting to know exactly who they're going to meet. The image of Darius comes to his mind, reminding him that the spoiled heir isn't around after having his hand crushed. Noticing his distraction, the Lord gets the boy's attention to confirm if he's paying attention. Snapping out of his thoughts, our hero nods, maintaining a completely carefree posture. To reassure the man, he promises that just for today, he will behave as passively as possible. The enormous wooden doors swing open, revealing a dark hall with a red carpet. The guards announce the arrival of Lord Heifried and his adopted son to the council. Walking down the long carpet, the two are greeted by a hoarse voice commenting on how much time has passed. An old man with a white beard and a severe gaze confirms the arrival of his own grandson. The patriarch of the Branch family immediately kneels as a sign of absolute respect to the elder. Observing the people seated in the shadows, Heifried formally greets his great-grandfather. The boy feels a dense energy in the air and recognizes the shadowy presence that commands the family from behind the scenes. It is Zenith, the sixth official leader of the main house, revealing his time-worn face. The protagonist scans the hall with his eyes, noticing several other important figures gathered in the darkness. He quickly recognizes some of the nobles who were present on the day of the sword festival. Maintaining his posture, the young man deduces that Duke Roderick is not present at this meeting. Reading his reaction, Zenith confirms that the cruel commander did not attend. The old man explains that the current leader is too busy with the royal knights to waste time on trivial matters. Kneeling beside his father, Aster reflects that in his past life, he never had the chance to see this council up close. He concludes that gathering so many executives without the presence of the current head proves the immense influence of those shadows. Tense about the situation, Heifred asks what exactly this trivial matter is that brought them here. With a dry laugh, the elder notes that the Viscount already knows the answer very well. The memory of the brutal duel in the arena resurfaces as the old man accuses the boy of causing a public disgrace. Hearing the insult, our hero's gaze darkens, confirming that the whole mess was because of that clash. Defending his son, the patriarch argues that Roderick himself had already resolved that issue personally. Outraged, the other council members retort that it was all just a show to deceive everyone. Zenith decrees from behind that taking in an orphan was a mistake, warning that exile is the only fitting punishment. In a desperate leap, Aster raises his hands, begging them to stop, taking full blame for the situation. It all starts with Aster taking the blame, trying to spare his adoptive father from the main house's punishment. But Heifred just lowers his head in complete silence. At that, the protagonist looks back, completely confused by the Lord's passive reaction. The old Zenith comments that the boy wasn't well trained, as a child shouldn't interrupt. The elder points out that they lead 12,000 knights, under the prestigious name of Elmium. He explains that this enormous military force does not have a unified mind. According to the leader, there are always ambitious people eyeing the top of the hierarchy. Therefore, he assures them that this meeting is merely to ensure the peace and security of the family. Tapping his cane on the floor, Zenith decrees there is no proof that the boy won't cause trouble. With that, the Viscount's eyes widen, feeling the weight of that unjust decision. The old man raises his sword and recalls the day the patriarch failed to protect the Lord. He makes a point of remembering that he forced Roderick to cut off Heifred's arm right there. Emanating a murderous aura, the leader demands that the Viscount prove his loyalty by beheading the boy. Aster is utterly shocked by the cruelty of that absurd order. However, maintaining his kneeling posture, Heifred directly and unshakably refuses the demand. The protagonist is quite touched to hear that his father would rather take his own life than take his. Understanding the refusal, Zenith turns his back with total indifference. He leans on his cane, sealing the fate of everyone there on the red carpet. Without showing any mercy, the elder orders their immediate execution. Just then, the knights advance quickly with swords ready to exterminate the Viscount. Heifred draws his weapon to defend his son, showing he won't go down without a fight. But suddenly, Aster steps forward, questioning why his great-grandfather is so afraid of him. Hearing the provocation, the old man stops and stares daggers at the boy. Surrounded by blades, our hero mocks the adults for cowering in fear before their own dog. He challenges the elders, warning that he swears revenge if they touch his family. The Viscount tries to apologize for the situation, fearing the worst. Ripping his own shirt with force, the boy confesses he's terrible at staying quiet. One of the guards backs away, completely terrified by what he just saw. The legendary crest overflows on the young man's back, revealing the raw, naked truth. Unleashing a colossal red energy, Aster decrees that the 7 wings have become their enemy. Engulfed in an absurd aura, our hero tells the old men to think very carefully about the consequences. The entire council panics upon facing the magical miracle in person. 2 nobles whisper among themselves, doubting that mark is real after so many centuries. Another counselor breaks into a cold sweat, admitting the design is undeniably genuine. Zenith watches the boy with extreme caution, measuring the danger of the situation. With blades still pointed at him, the young man asks if they understand the weight of that power. Showing great confidence, he assures them he knows the extent of the surprise he's causing. Breaking the tense atmosphere, the blue-haired lord begins to laugh loudly without stopping. Known as Count Maze, he apologizes for the interruption and asks the rookie to continue. Regaining control, Zenith explains that in ancient times, the wings were gifts from the spirits. This raw magic was passed down from generation to generation, strengthening humanity. Legend says that mystical beasts are the only true progenitors of the wings in the world. However, the leader reinforces that no human had ever reached the 7th wing before. The boy listens to the explanation with great attention, awaiting the verdict. Assessing the situation, the elder questions if our hero claims to be a direct descendant of the spirits. Behind the boy, the Viscount remains in a combat stance, extremely tense. Aster stands firm in the center of the hall without retreating a single millimeter. Being very direct, he throws the weight of his own power on the table and ignores questions about lineage. The boy warns that many rebel nobles would love to have the owner of the 7 wings as an ally. He positions himself as a living threat far greater than Duke Roderick himself. The council members are outraged by the child's absurd audacity. Celebrating the chaos, the protagonist describes the imminent civil war that will devastate the country. He states with absolute conviction that he has already witnessed this grim future once. Zenith stares daggers at the boy, furious at being blackmailed in his own house. Underestimating the threat, the old man asks if the adopted one really thinks he's worth all this risk. The boy retorts mockingly, challenging the leader to try and take him out right there if he thinks it's a lie. Leaning heavily on his cane, the old man warns that if he accepts the challenge, war will be declared. The leader firmly grips the hilt of his sword, ready to decimate his opponent in an instant. But at this critical moment, Count Maze claps, interrupting the murderous tension. The Lord stands up, stating they are just going in circles with this useless discussion. Showing great cunning, Maze suggests imposing a practical challenge to test the rookie. One of the elders revolts, questioning the Count's attitude in the middle of the crisis. Maintaining his composure, the nobleman points out that it costs nothing to decide the boy's fate later. He walks calmly to Aster, arguing that everyone wants to see the magical miracle in action. Facing the injured boy, Maze confirms he has the strength to face difficult trials. The protagonist relaxes his shoulders upon realizing that this eccentric lord is his ally. Stomping his foot on the ground, Zenith agrees with the idea and tells the boy to follow him. The shadowy leader passes the young man, muttering that disciplining an insolent grandson is his duty. Arriving at Heavy Gate, the old man opens the passage, revealing the dark testing grounds. It is a gigantic bunker connected directly to the city's water channels. Emanating a macabre aura, the elder explains that they keep a dangerous magical beast imprisoned there. Hyfried and Aster listen to the final instructions, paying close attention to every detail. Drawing the sword Graham, the boy confesses to his father that it was about time he revealed his secret. The Viscount warns the youngest not to let his guard down for even a second in that dark hole. Sliding down a heavy iron chain, Aster plummets into the darkness, ready for a massacre. Our hero lands in the dark underground, while Count Maze watches the situation from above with great interest. Wading through the shallow water, the young man soon realizes that this place is truly pitch black, but he remains calm, assuring himself that it's not so dark as to leave him completely blind. Just then, the boy freezes for a moment upon seeing something bizarre right in front of him. Looking up at the light from the grate, the boy comments that he tried to give the beast a chance to explain itself. However, the monster did nothing but cry and scream until the end, making it impossible to keep watching. Heavy footsteps echo in the darkness, revealing the imposing presence of the magical beast approaching. From above, Zenith warns his insolent grandson not to disappoint him in any way. With the terrifying roar of a gigantic demonic lion, the old man decrees the official start of this deadly test. Facing the monster head on, Aster finally understands that the rumors about the family hiding a beast were real. Gripping his sword firmly, he feels sorry for anyone born into this cursed house full of atrocities. Without wasting time, our hero charges straight at the giant lion, slicing through the air. The nobles above are impressed by the boy's absurd speed. Completely calm about the danger, the protagonist scoffs, claiming he's much more afraid of his sister Kudryavka. In a swift move, he passes through the monster with a precise strike and lands right behind the creature. But Aster's confidence vanishes instantly as he realizes something is very wrong. He watches in shock as the beast regenerates the bizarre wound using disgusting tentacles. Understanding the gravity of the situation, the boy realizes he's fighting an undead creature. Grabbing the bars desperately, Hyfried shouts, demanding to know why there's an abomination like that in the house's basement. With total coldness, the old Zenith simply replies that the beast loves the smell of demise. The leader explains he brought the creature to devour corpses and serve as an indestructible training partner. Thus, the main family never again had problems getting rid of unwanted bodies. Hearing that, one of the counselors comments that an undead is a problem even for experienced knights. The man questions if they're really going to let the boy meet his end. Like that just for talking too much. Down below, the protagonist continues to relentlessly dodge the beast's violent attacks. Zenith tells the counselor to relax, assuring him that if the boy falls, it will be even more convenient for the family. While Hyfried remains tense, Count Maze just lets out a few laughs, finding the whole situation very amusing. The blue-haired lord comments it would be a shame to lose someone who showed so much potential. Rooting for the rookie, he mentally pleads for Aster not to go down so easily down there. Delivering a sequence of rapid cuts, the boy realizes all his effort is completely useless. Seeing the beast heal again, he's impressed by this absurd regeneration for a normal monster. Without backing down from the fight, our hero tries to remember how to eliminate such a pest once and for all. He concludes he would need sunlight, intense fire, or even weapons with holy power. With the monster charging furiously, the boy admits that facing something like this without the right tools is foolish. But knowing there's no way out of there, he decides that using cheap tricks is unworthy of his power. Holding the sword with both hands, Aster concentrates all his energy to show his true worth. A colossal red aura explodes from the blade as he decrees he will crush the beast with brute force. The impact of the absurd blow kicks up a cloud of dust and debris all over the battlefield. The shockwave is so strong it throws the nobles back, startled by that oppressive magic. Regaining their balance, the counselors crowd the grate, trying to see if the kid won. As for old Zenith, he just grumbles, observing the dust-filled crater with a stern face. In the middle of the smoke, the protagonist remains in a combat stance, waiting for the outcome of his attack. From above, the grim great-grandfather comments with disdain that all that brute force was a real shame. Suddenly, the lion's gigantic paw tears through the smoke in a surprise attack against the boy. Unable to dodge in time, Aster takes the full impact and is thrown violently backward. The smoke clears, revealing the monster is still alive and already regenerating its lost limb. Desperate to see his son thrown so far, the Viscount shouts his name, clinging to the iron bars. But Count Maze quickly intervenes, warning the Lord not to be foolish enough to try and help. Furious with the interference, Hyfried asks if the Count really expects him to watch the boy meet his end. Maintaining his annoying calm, the blue-haired nobleman asks the Viscount to keep his cool. He points back to the pit, indicating that the fight is still far from over. Getting up from the rubble, the protagonist cracks an excited smile, realizing his trump card worked. The roaring beast now displays red burns on its body, showing its regeneration is failing. Excited by the discovery, the young man concentrates even more of that scarlet energy into his blade. He charges forward again, unleashing a storm of brutal cuts that relentlessly tear the lion apart. Dominated by adrenaline, Aster vows he will keep slicing the abomination until it stops healing. The attacks create a true vortex of destructive magic that completely engulfs the creature. Watching the massacre, one of the counselors is dumbfounded by that absurd level of power. He questions if this display of overwhelming force isn't something entirely different from what they've ever seen. Just then, the violence of the blow is so great that even the stone floor, where the nobles are standing, begins to collapse. The guards quickly pull the old men back as the edge of the pit plummets into the darkness. Safe from the collapse, the family leader's eyes widen, impressed by what he just witnessed. Engulfed in the red tornado, Aster proudly displays the true and absolute power of the 7 wings. Once the dust settles and silence reigns, the trembling counselors approach, trying to understand what happened. Looking into the destroyed pit, one of the nobles realizes there's absolutely nothing left of the giant beast. The old Zenith continues to stare at the arena in a heavy, evaluative silence. He concludes that the boy pulverized the entire undead creature by drowning it in an unreal amount of raw magic. Sheathing his sword calmly, the boy proved that you don't need technique when you have such overwhelming strength. The elder questions the Viscount if all this destruction was also part of his plan. Shaking his head, Hyfried proudly confesses that his son's growth continues to surprise him every day. Seizing the moment, Count Maze turns to the great-grandfather and asks if the kid is officially approved for the test. Turning his back to the hole, the shadowy leader grumbles that no one there would dare to make any objections. As the old men leave the area, the eccentric lord shouts down, giving the good news of the victory. However, the Count laughingly informs him that the climbing chains were completely destroyed by the explosion of his attack. Trapped in the crater he himself made, our hero lets out an awkward smile and asks someone to throw down a rope. Back in the office, Zenith questions if the boy is really sure about his refusal. Aster confirms without hesitation, assuring him he has no interest in the main family's succession war, and that his presence would only make his cousins restless. He reinforces that his place is exclusively within the Viscounty, but the old man gives a dry laugh, asking if the young man thinks he's being humble. The elder warns that the boy can't hide the enormous ambition reflected in his own eyes. Staring at his grandson up close, the leader states that the young man intends to turn his blade against Elmium at some point. Tense from the accurate reading, our hero gets defensive as the old man asks if it's Roderick's head he so desires. But Zenith just laughs at the boy's reaction, promising he has no intention of investigating his true motives for now. Intrigued by that passive attitude, Aster asks why the leader doesn't consider the rebels as direct enemies. With great calm, the elder recalls that the family's enormous military force does not have a completely unified mind. He explains that Roderick has become too stubborn, and he's perfectly fine with the boy's existence serving as a good check to rein in the Duke. Tapping his cane on the floor, the old man warns that if the boy dares to show his fangs to him again, the consequences will be fatal. Leaving the room, the young man mutters about that Elmheim monster as Hyfried approaches, asking about the conversation. The Viscount is stunned to hear that his son refused an official invitation to join the main family. Just then, Count Maze approaches, commenting that this move was a real shame. The eccentric lord points out that the young man would have a much sweeter life at the headquarters, and is immediately recognized by our hero. Getting straight to the point, Aster questions why the nobleman offered that unusual help during the deadly trial. Feigning innocence, Maze replies that he was just in the mood to provoke a cheeky brat. Putting his arm around the boy, the Count changes the subject to emphasize that he is now officially a child of the 7 wings. Discreetly pointing upwards, the Lord tells the young man to take a good look around the hall. Several bigwigs watch our hero from the balconies, torn between wanting to use him as a political tool or eliminating him before he becomes a lethal threat. Resuming his speech, Maze reminds him that the sacred crest carries tremendous prestige on its own throughout the entire kingdom. Because of this, he warns that the number of people trying to get close to or attack the boy will only increase from now on. Without letting his guard down, the protagonist stares daggers at the nobleman, wanting to know if he's one of those opportunists too. Maintaining a calm demeanor, the Count prefers not to respond directly to the provocation. Instead, he reveals he's one of the directors of the Knight Academy, and explains that recruiting promising young talents early is part of his job. Pointing to the end of the hall, Maze comments that old Zenith acts in the exact same sneaky way. Bidding a friendly farewell, the blue-haired lord states he's looking forward to seeing the rookie enroll in the military institution. Watching the man walk away, Aster admits he's very hard to read and wonders if he can already consider him a reliable ally. Cutting off his train of thought, Hyfried touches his son's shoulder, calling him to return home safely. The Viscount proudly says he needs to tell his daughters about that incredible performance, while the boy imagines his mother will faint when she sees his injuries. Far away, a kneeling knight reports to Duke Roderick that the young Lord Darius lost his life during Zenith's last test. Listening in silence, the blonde nobleman asks what happened to Viscount Hyfried's adopted son. The soldier hesitates a bit and comments that the leader seemed not to care at all about his own blood's demise in the dungeon. Lacing his fingers calmly, Roderick concludes that the legendary Seven Wings have truly awakened in that insignificant boy. The captain of the guard looks up, astonished, realizing the Duke already suspected this dangerous secret. Concerned about the situation, the knight warns that this absolute power could destroy the balance of power maintained by Elmime. He suggests immediate action against the boy before the opposition can use him in the impending civil war. However, Roderick just closes his eyes and tells his subordinates to leave the kid alone for now. With great arrogance, the Lord claims that if the main family were to crumble over such a small obstacle, it would have fallen long ago. Rising from his chair, he assures them there's no need to rush this hunt. The Duke declares with absolute certainty that the boy and the magical miracle will fall into his hands at the right moment. Until then, the plan is to let the young man run free to see how much he can struggle against his destined fate. Recalling the day he tore off Hyfried's arm in the snow, Roderick promises to enjoy this little show without interfering. Displaying a predatory gaze in the darkness, the villain whispers our hero's name with pure obsession. 4 years later, the scene shifts to the bustling reception desk of the Dorisal Knight Academy entrance exam. In the training courtyard, some candidates whisper as they watch a sturdy young man approaching. They doubt he's the famous prodigy, as the rumors always said the magical hair was much more intimidating. At the registration desk, the official states that the institution assumes no responsibility for fatal accidents during the exam. The inspector asks the next candidate to sign the paper and display their magical crest to prove their ability. But the examiner freezes and is left speechless upon reading the prestigious surname Elmime on the registration document. Breaking into a cold sweat, he looks up, stunned by the presence of this living legend right in front of him. A bit awkwardly, Aster scratches his head, explaining that his mark is in a very complicated place to show off in front of everyone. Showing great confidence, the dark-haired young man asks if his face alone doesn't serve as an entrance pass. The grand stone structure of the academy rises on the horizon, welcoming the thousands of young warriors of the nation. As the protagonist walks through the streets of the testing area, a shrill voice demands his immediate attention. The muscular guy from before blocks his path, calling the newcomer an annoying show-off. Displaying the sword on his back, the troublemaker introduces himself as Vigar Smates and mocks the rookie's unknown origins. Pointing to the giant emblem on the gates, the bully emphasizes that this place is exclusively for the true elite of the kingdom. Not giving a darn about the drama, Aster agrees there's no problem and tries to leave, frustrating the brute. Smates violently grabs the boy's shoulder, lecturing about how everyone present trained hard to achieve this golden dream. Judging the short weapon on the boy's hip, Smates claims the academy is no place for a beginner swordsman to play warrior. With an air of pure superiority, the bully tells the rookie to turn around and go home if he just wants to stroll around the capital. Around them, the other candidates sigh, tired of seeing the veteran intimidating the freshman yet again. However, one of the boys recognizes our hero's identity and warns that Smates is messing with the worst possible person in that courtyard. Hearing the title of the Seven Wings, the big guy swallows hard, realizing the huge mistake he just made. Before a real fight can break out, a mocking voice echoes through the crowd, greeting the protagonist uninvited. Aster recognizes the cynical tone immediately and turns his head, annoyed, to face the inconvenient relative. Placing a hand on his chest with false elegance, Grine introduces himself and welcomes the forgotten member of the family. The red-haired noble makes a point of insulting his cousin's abandoned origins, right in front of all the competitors. Completely changing his posture, Grine pretends to be deeply shaken by the recent passing of Darius during the trials. But right after, he bursts out laughing, assuring them that an incompetent disgrace like that deserved to lose his life. The redhead reports that his own brother was a huge nuisance for trying to act arrogant all the time. Resting his hand on his sword, The noble confesses he couldn't care less about the ridiculous rumors of the magical miracle. Leaning close to Aster's ear, he warns the youngest to be careful, as there are no adult lords here to protect him. As the Elmheim veterans turn their backs, the extras lament their own luck for having to face these freaks in the practical exam. In the midst of all this tension, the other candidates whisper about the heavy rivalry between the families. They prefer to back off to avoid getting caught in the middle of that mess. Just then, Smates breaks into a cold sweat as he senses the danger. Someone in the crowd asks if the rookie is a certain person of great renown. The question hangs in the air, asking if the young man in black clothes is the famous member of the Elmheim family. With a malicious glint in his eye, Brian just watches the terrified reaction of the other competitors at the revelation. Ignoring the hostility, the protagonist calmly raises his hand and asks to be called just Aster, without formalities. Soon, the powerful voice of an inspector echoes from the top of a giant tower, welcoming everyone to the site of the first test. The gray-haired man speaks firmly, reminding them that their main duty here is to serve and protect the king at all costs. He states they are glorious swords risking their lives for the crown, making it clear there is no room for weak or foolish warriors. As the candidates walk towards the enormous wall, the examiner tells them to consider today's test a true battlefield. During the walk, Aster finds the whole speech quite ridiculous. Even so, he admits to himself that he has finally made it back to this place. The nostalgia for the past hits him hard, remembering that this path to becoming a royal knight was completely denied to him when he was a wingless nobody. The image of the relentless leader comes to his mind. Our hero knows that beyond these walls lies a world of the strong, dominated by Commander Roderick. Without bowing his head, the young man vows to reach the top very soon and tells the Duke to just wait patiently for his arrival. With a clear objective in mind, he decrees that the first step to his revenge is to survive and pass this selection test. Suddenly cutting off his thoughts, the inspector announces the immediate start of the exam as iron spears shoot from the walls. Without any warning, one of the blades brutally pierces a candidate's head, shocking Aster with the lethality of the first test. The boy's body drops stiffly to the stone floor as the first trial is officially revealed as the tower test. A true storm of lethal arrows rains down on the young people, and the only rule is to stay standing until the end. Panic instantly takes over the courtyard. The candidates run desperately from one side to the other, not knowing how to handle the attack. Screams echo off the walls as several boys warn they'll be massacred if they stay put in the middle of this deadly arena. In a desperate attempt to survive, some clever warriors form small groups to cover each other's backs and block the weapons together. From above, the examiner notes that the veterans accustomed to the test know exactly how to react to the surprise ambush. Even with these group defense strategies, the man coldly admits that the exam's survival rate is only around 30%. He explains that these superficial defenses won't hold up for long against the relentless pressure of the continuous shots. With a swift and light movement, Grind deflects a heavy spear, proving the Academy is looking for something far beyond simple teamwork. The real goal is to find warriors with a brutal capacity for problem solving, something exclusive to those who possess the power of the wings. Huddled under their sword shields, the other candidates notice Aster standing still in the danger zone and think he's frozen in fear. Safe from the chaos, the arrogant redhead lets out a little laugh, hoping the youngest turns into a pincushion stuck with arrows right there. Completely focused on what matters, the protagonist ignores the cowardly insults and just firmly grips the hilt of his weapon. In an explosive move, he draws his blade, unleashing a hurricane of red aura that instantly sweeps away the attacks around him. Caught off guard by the unexpected brute force, the inspector's eyes widen in shock at what he just witnessed in the courtyard. The boy deflects absolutely every projectile, creating a dome of pure energy, and challenges the exam to throw everything it has at him. The spears rain down relentlessly, but are violently repelled as soon as they touch the insane flow of scarlet magic. Shielding their faces from the wind, the competitors are terrified and wonder what kind of monster formed that barrier. Grain breaks into a cold sweat with an expression of pure rage, indignant that no lethal attack can get close to his cousin's body. Because of this, the gray-haired man realizes the young man is rotating the expelled mana to create an impenetrable current and praises his control. The magical barrier rises so densely and aggressively that our hero seems completely isolated in the middle of his own storm. Shortly after, the shots finally cease. The boys look up confused, trying to figure out if the carnage is over for good. From above, the examiner admits that more people pass than he expected, but concludes that it doesn't change much in the end. Using his powerful voice, he congratulates everyone on their good work and tells the victors to pay attention to the bodies on the stone floor. Among the dozens of scattered weapons, the inspector officially decrees that the warriors still standing have passed the first test. Without giving the young people a second to rest, he orders them all to follow him immediately to the site of the second stage of admission. As they sheathe their swords, One of the boys lets out a heavy sigh of relief and complains about how strict that examiner can be. Side by side, his breathless colleague jokes, asking if Aster is already tired after surviving that entire iron rain. The boy takes a better look at the protagonist's physical state and is completely impressed that he shows no signs of exhaustion. Up ahead, the gray-haired man peeks at the boy from the corner of his eye, astonished by the lack of fatigue after such heavy use of magic. For his part, the examiner assures himself that he is very eager to see the evolution of the seven-wing warrior in the next phase. As the group advances through the bright corridors, Grian steps aside to talk secretly with one of his cowardly subordinates. A dark memory surfaces, recalling the express order from the main house to prevent the rookie from becoming a knight at all costs. Under immense pressure, the redhead knows very well he needs to eliminate the youngest to ensure the prosperous future of his own ducal lineage. In front of the new courtyard, the inspector distributes identical blades, ordering an immediate weapon swap to ensure fairness in the test. Handing over his demonic relic, Aster grumbles about how annoying this is and asks if the test rules have always been this strict. The rookie boy next to him calmly explains that for mid-level warriors like them, swapping standard blades makes no difference at all. However, his partner notices the weird hilt of our hero's weapon being taken away and suggests that the administration might be afraid of that equipment. Silently agreeing with the theory, the protagonist realizes that hiding his relic's strength here wouldn't be a bad idea. In the bustling woods, Aster mockingly notes that his redhead cousin already has his pathetic cronies acting like dogs under his complete control. Annoyed by the direct provocation, one of the boys pokes our hero's back, denying he's a lackey, but Aster recognizes him instantly as a minor heir. In a very serious, threatening tone, our hero warns the third-rate noble to be very careful not to end up growling at the wrong person. Intimidated by his rival's murderous posture, the young man swallows hard and backs away desperately, asking Grian not to make him fight that monster. Finding that pathetic scene amusing, our hero quickly notices the heavy and hostile atmosphere forming among the teams in the courtyard. Between the dirty looks and malicious whispers, he concludes that the whole arrogant atmosphere of the local high nobility is quite unpleasant. Grabbing everyone's attention again, the experienced knight raises his voice and announces that the second stage is focused on a large siege battle. The rules state that the survivors will be divided into 3 distinct teams, fighting directly for control of the positions in the woods. A base is captured by hoisting an allied flag. Victory goes to the alliance that controls 2 or more areas before the bell rings. Aside from the prohibition on damaging the colored banners, the inspector assures them that anything goes and authorizes deadly attacks with the distributed blades. With the small flags in his hands, the man begins the official drawing that will determine the final formation of the afternoon's combat squads. Immediately, the crowd of boys begins to disperse across the terrain, organizing into groups according to their drawn colors. Supported by his allies under the light blue flag, Aster closely analyzes the teammates who will risk their lives alongside him in this trial. A spark of magic intensely illuminates the orange sky, signaling the start of the battle for survival in the dangerous jungle without delay. Adjusting his cloth gloves, the young man mentally reviews the mission to capture at least 2 of the 3 vital points to avoid failure. Nearby in the woods, 2 cronies from the yellow team nervously conclude that only one squad will come out of this territorial war unscathed. The soldier trembles just thinking that at some point they will have to face the power of that Elmium prodigy head on. Thanks to his sharp warrior's hearing, the protagonist turns his head slightly, confused, hearing all the drama from the boys before the fight. Not understanding the panic, his arrogant partner smirks sadistically and whispers that their problem is far from the rookie's brute force. The real shadowy threat that terrifies the pawns is the deadly retaliation from the main house if they oppress the political interests of cousin Grian. Displaying total arrogance, Grian warns that going head to head with the main house means never holding your head high as a royal knight again. In the worst-case scenario, the rebels' entire lineage ends up being mercilessly massacred by the family's guards. Resigned to the situation, Smates asks if our hero is going to drop out of the exam as the boy removes the blue band from his arm. The brute laments the situation, stating that the rookie would probably never understand how the weak truly feel. Running alone through the woods, the protagonist grumbles about ending up completely isolated right in the middle of a team battle. This is no surprise to him, as the knights know that his cousin's family is a symbol of untouchable terror. The coward's words about the feeling of weakness echo in the boy's mind again. Keeping his cool, he perfectly understands that to those pawns, he's just another useless piece on the board. Advancing through the open terrain, Aster notices the environment is bizarrely silent, with no confrontations happening. He stops suddenly, suspicious of all the peace, questioning if the teams are just being very cautious. But then it hits him, realizing this strange calm proves everything is going exactly according to the enemy's plan. Arriving at the main base of the territory, our hero finds a blonde noble already waiting for him next to the hoisted flag. With his guard up, Aster connects the dots and deduces this guy is part of the redhead here's scheme. Showing impatience, the stranger complains about the delay, stating he was starting to get bored. The blonde boy throws the yellow banner away and calls the rookie to a fight, wanting to test his strength. Shocked by his rival's attitude, the protagonist watches the fabric fall to the grass. He is completely confused to see the blonde holding a red flag instead of the original one. Just then, heavy footsteps echo from behind the boy, revealing the arrival of several other armed competitors. Leading the group, Grian scoffs, warning that he's going to teach the youngest how the ducal house really fights. The main rule of that siege stage comes back to the boy's mind, in the middle of the dangerous ambush. To ensure absolute victory, a team needed to control at least 2 bases by the time limit. Drawing his sword, Aster focuses on the fact that planting one's own color in enemy territory is the final condition. Without hesitation, our hero questions the blonde, reminding him he was drawn for the yellow team. In response, the light-haired noble firmly plants the red pole in the ground. The arrogant boy explains that the answer is quite simple, revealing he made a direct alliance with the redhead here. Watching from a distance, Grian praises his ally, introducing him as the eldest son of the prestigious Nolan family. Observing from the top of the tower, the gray-haired inspector analyzes the situation, recalling the impeccable performance of both boys. In the first deadly trial, Aster and Nolan were the only ones who survived the rain of arrows without showing any effort. The examiner is amazed by the scene, considering these two prodigies as true raw gems of the cavalry. Surrounded on all sides in the courtyard, the protagonist just ironically criticizes this supposed alliance between rival teams. Firmly gripping his weapon, the boy remembers that in the end, only one squad will emerge victorious from here. The blonde boy fully agrees and confesses he has already decided to hand over the victory to the main house on a silver platter. It dawns on Aster in that instant, realizing Grian's lackeys must be attacking his base right now. With his eyes filled with fury, he glares at his opponent, asking if his cousin threatened him to force this help. Nolan shrugs, stating that no one would be dumb enough to stand in the way of a runaway carriage. Without wasting time, the noble charges, cutting through the wind with his sword drawn. Delivering a heavy blow from above, he decrees that bowing to the stronger is the natural behavior of the nobility. The protagonist blocks the violent attack, but immediately realizes there's something very wrong with his standard issue blade. Feeling the metal give way, he suspects the examiner deliberately gave him a defective weapon. Pressing the offensive, the blonde assures him the fight will be a fair duel, and that the soldiers won't interfere. He reveals he was never a fan of the Elmheim family, but he hates show-offs even more. The frantic clash continues with the blades repeatedly colliding, sending sparks flying. The overwhelming pressure from the enemy makes our hero's sword begin to crack dangerously in the middle of his defense. Seizing the critical moment, Nolan lands a clean blow that shatters the rookie's weapon into several pieces. But the noble's confidence vanishes instantly as he notices an unexpected movement in front of him. Seeing his rival turn his back, the blonde shouts indignantly, asking if the coward is trying to run from the fight. Running at full speed, our hero says he'll deal with him later, because he has some urgent business to settle now. The heir of House Nolan is left completely confused, thinking he actually struck terror into the heart of that prodigy. But as he looks at the ground, a piece of metal thrown on the gravel catches his attention. Picking up the fragment of the shattered blade, he confirms that the steel is of no quality and breaks very easily. Sighing in disappointment, the noble understands that this sabotaged weapon was the dirty work of the coward Grian. Arriving desperately at the gates of his own base, Aster shouts for his brute companion, wanting to know if they're alive. However, he finds his redhead cousin waiting for him, who exudes superiority, saying the rookie arrived too early. Sitting comfortably, the sadist laments that his blonde ally couldn't hold back the family trash for long. Grian points to the red flag already hoisted there, announcing they have just completely dominated the third territory. Consumed by a cold rage, our hero glares at his relative and says his name in a very threatening tone. Walking slowly through the courtyard, he demands to know what that bunch of cowards did to his teammates. The redhead's cynical expression vanishes, replaced by a very tense look in the face of the youngest's fury. Without his main weapon, Aster quickly draws the backup dagger he carried on his back. Totally focused on the takedown, the protagonist remembers he warned from the beginning that he wouldn't play anyone's dirty game. Tied up on the ground, Smates turns his head and grumbles that only a complete idiot would dare challenge Elmheim's authority. Letting out a hysterical laugh, the cousin celebrates the fact that the blue team didn't even try to offer resistance. He taunts that the pawns know how to pick the right side, but Aster retorts, asking if numbers alone win the fight. Making a sign with his hands, Grian assures the rookie he's mistaken, and that the main victory is already a done deal. The sight of the 3 red flags waving confirms that this team's territorial dominance is absolute at the moment. The redhead explains that even if the boy runs around desperately planting banners, there will be no one to defend them. The abandoned blue band on the arena floor proves our hero is completely alone in this siege war. With great coldness, the sadist details that the guards only need to wait for the boy to leave the base to hoist the red cloth again. Exuding arrogance, he decrees that they just need to keep the 2 points secure until the signal sounds to guarantee everyone's approval. Gripping his dagger, our hero takes a step forward, promising he'll make sure they can't even do that. The young man's eyes shine with pure murderous intent as he vows to take down every single enemy present. Feeling the overwhelming pressure of that demonic aura, the allied soldiers retreat, completely terrified. But the redhead refuses to back down, stating with conviction that the youngest is just bluffing. Pointing to the courtyard, he reminds him that without a decent blade, all that power of the 7 wings is absolutely useless. Surrounded by an army of armed lackeys, the protagonist hears his cousin ask if he really wants to try and fight them all. Staring at what's left of his broken sword, Aster admits the current situation is a real problem. Dropping the useless piece of steel on the ground, the protagonist confesses he was quite impressed by his cousin's attitude. Tied up and on the ground, Smates watches the scene, completely shocked by the boy's calmness. Drawing his backup dagger, our hero praises the enemy's plan, saying it was thought out much better than he expected. With a sadistic smile and eyes gleaming with madness, Gryan is absolutely certain he has already won the contest. The silence is broken only by the sound of the rest of the blade falling onto the dry courtyard dirt. However, the youngest's sharp gaze shows he's not the least bit worried about this disadvantage. Pointing the short weapon directly at his adversary, the rookie repeats that the show put on by his relative truly surprised him. Blinded by his own arrogance, the rival group's leader keeps mentally repeating that victory is already in his hands. As soon as the useless metal finally hits the ground, the peaceful atmosphere completely disappears. In the blink of an eye, the protagonist charges forward, tearing through the wind at an absurd speed that startles the surrounding lackeys. Without giving a chance to defend, he lands a heavy blow right in the stomach of one of the soldiers, who spits blood instantly. Seizing the opening, the boy quickly spins across the field and takes down another crony with extreme ease. Focused on the takedown, Aster grips the hilt of the small blade as his magical energy begins to overflow. A violent blast of red ore explodes in the air, sending another enemy flying with the brutal impact. Watching his men being massacred, Gryan's eyes widen, not understanding at all what just happened. Already on top of the base's wall, our hero states that his cousin's biggest mistake was showing up right in front of him. Exuding an overwhelming pressure, the rookie warns that this overconfidence will cost the enemy their victory. Overcome with dread, the rival leader retreats, cursing the boy and calling him a true monster. Without wasting time on insults, the protagonist leaps from the wall, engulfed in a storm of lethal red magic. Slicing through the sky like a scarlet comet, he plummets with full force toward his desperate relative. Trying to draw his own sword, the sadist is shocked to see the youngest manage to cover that entire distance through the air. Staring at his prey up close, Aster coldly warns that his relative was too slow to draw his weapon. With a relentless move, the rookie lands a devastating kick right in his adversary's stomach. In this frantic moment, an unusual memory of when he first flew as a baby crosses the protagonist's mind. Seeing the enemy thrown far away, the boy reflects that because he was born without wings in the past, he can feel this power much better. He lands gently as he confesses that having magic is great, remembering how that wall seemed unreachable. Lying on the dirt and trembling with fear, the defeated noble desperately begs the monster to stop the attack. Ignoring the pathetic plea, our hero raises his glowing dagger, ready to finish the fight once and for all. With a confident smile, the protagonist completes his thought, saying that any obstacle now seems too small. The impact of the final blow generates a massive energy explosion that kicks up a lot of dust and destroys the arena floor. Slowly, the thick smoke begins to clear, revealing the outcome of the confrontation for control of the territory. Outside, the other candidates watch the destruction, terrified, trying to understand what the heck just happened. Still tied up nearby, Smates breaks into a cold sweat, completely paralyzed by the absurd level of that battle. In the middle of the dust cloud, our hero's imposing silhouette appears, standing, staring at his cousin's fallen body. Breathing calmly, the young man in black clothes maintains a cold expression without showing a hint of remorse. In a sudden movement, he firmly grabs the collar of his defeated adversary's shirt. Lifting the humiliated sadist from the ground as if he were trash, the boy makes him groan in pain from the violent pull. Staring at the terrified band of lackeys, the protagonist angrily questions why they're still standing there doing nothing. Bleeding and dizzy, Gryan tries to give a pathetic order, telling his soldiers to take out the rookie immediately. Desperate for help, he screams with all his might that this is an official demand from the main lineage. Hearing the political threat, the brute clicks his tongue in frustration and tries to free himself from his bonds. Our hero stares daggers at the cowardly soldiers, asking if they're that afraid of the ducal house's revenge. Now free and holding his weapon, Smates admits he's terrified because his family is very weak, and any mistake would be the end. The veteran vents that the weak are always crushed like ants, forced to live submissively to survive in this world. With his eyes welling up with revolt, the warrior yells that someone so powerful would never understand the suffering of those who have nothing. Surprised by the sincerity of that outburst, the boy falls completely silent, absorbing the words he just heard. A melancholic expression takes over the protagonist's face as he lowers his head with a slight smirk, not understanding the rookie's calm reaction in the middle of the tension. Smates stammers, asking what's so funny. Just then, our hero nostalgically remembers his older sister used to say that exact same thing to him in the past. Returning to reality, he admits he could argue about it, but agrees that right now, he is indeed very blessed with magic. Pressing the cold steel against the enemy's neck, the youngest warns that it's precisely because he has this power that there are things only he can resolve. Declaring war out loud, the young man guarantees he will destroy the main house's arrogance, since the extras are too weak to try. Overcome by a brutal fury and exuding a pure murderous aura, our hero promises to crush the entire ducal lineage with his own hands. The opposing soldiers and the veteran's eyes widen, completely perplexed by the suicidal audacity of that statement. Immobilized on the gravel, the cousin swallows hard, breaking into a cold sweat at the rookie's insane threat. Shocked by the situation, Smates questions if the boy realizes he has just betrayed his entire blood family. Staring at those present with absolute seriousness, Aster doesn't back down an inch and confirms that this is an official declaration of war. The memory of the dark basement surfaces as he warns that blind devotion to this family only rewards the weak with betrayal and their end. Without changing his tone, the protagonist tells the pawns to fight for real if they don't want to have such a pathetic end in the future. Assuming his firm combat stance, Aster decrees that the magical miracle was born with him only to fulfill this lethal objective. Pointing to the two paths, he forces the enemies to choose right then and there which side of this internal war they intend to be on. The fallen noble struggles on the ground, demanding loyalty and threatening to hunt down every lackey who dares to betray the main house. Screaming, the coward warns he will destroy the lives of anyone who abandons him in the middle of this academy selection test. Pressured by the critical situation, Smates tells the redhead that everyone knows very well the cruel end that awaits them if they obey blindly. With his face twisted in fury for being used as a pawn, the veteran finally takes a courageous stand. In a surge of pure adrenaline, he lets out a powerful cry to finally shake off all the fear that held him back. The brute angrily throws his sword onto the stone floor of the base, accepting the consequences of his actions. Running straight to the protagonist's side, the soldier demands a guarantee that the arrogant leader's downfall will really happen. Grabbing the boy's shirt, the warrior vows he will never forgive him if he gives false hope of freedom to the weaker ones. The rookie cracks a sincere smile in the middle of the chaos and simply promises he will keep his word, no matter the cost. Hearing the young hero's firm response, the veteran relaxes his shoulders, feeling an immense relief wash over his mind. Grabbing the blue band fallen on the grass, the boy rips his old identification and proudly declares his full name for all to hear. Tying the fabric to his left arm, he seals his fate, stating loudly that from now on, he fights for our hero's branch. The other pawns are shocked by their allies' absurd courage, realizing in that instant that the redhead's entire political trap has just crumbled. Cornered and bleeding, Grind stares daggers at our hero and calls him a hate-filled country bumpkin. In the courtyard, Smates questions the other candidates, asking why they're still standing there doing nothing. The veteran encourages the group to show what they're made of and tells them all to bet their lives on the Seven Wings. Energized by the courageous speech, the other pawns finally take action and decide to join the rebellion. Watching the scene, Aster thinks with relief that at least he won't have to run around raising the flags alone. Even so, the protagonist reflects that this group alone is still not enough to bring down the ducal house. Nearby, the defeated hare remains on the ground, feeling the weight of crushing humiliation. Approaching calmly, the silver-haired noble extends a hand and asks if Grind is okay. Overcome with fury, the sadist slaps his ally's hand away and tells the useless trash not to touch him. Screaming, the redhead vows he will destroy all the scum from the Branch family, no matter the cost. In his thoughts, he fears he'll no longer be able to face the main family if he keeps letting the youngest do whatever he wants. The coward remembers his brother Darius, assuring himself he won't meet the same pathetic end. Clenching his bloodied hand, the hare refuses to accept that his journey ends in such a humiliating way. Suddenly, a heavy boot stops right in front of him as a mocking voice asks what's wrong. Staring down at the redhead, his former ally comments that he looks pathetic. Recognizing the voice immediately, Grind looks up and shouts Nolan's name with hope. Pointing furiously at the protagonist, the redhead demands to know what his ally was doing, since taking care of the youngest was his mission. With a malicious smile, the sadist internally celebrates having such a strong warrior still on his side. Analyzing the situation, the silver-haired noble admits that Aster's sword strength surpasses anyone there, even without the wing mark. Desperate for revenge, the hare screams, ordering his partner to cut the enemy to pieces at once. In response, Nolan simply throws the team's red flag right in the coward's face. Maintaining a calm demeanor, the young knight says he only came back to return that useless object. With a cold gaze, he states that the ducal house's dirty methods go completely against his pride. Turning his back without remorse, the lord officially declares their alliance broken, leaving Gryan stunned. The other lackeys panic at the betrayal, completely lost, not knowing which side to take now. With firm steps, Nolan warns that they're back to square one and questions if the rookie thought he'd pass without a fight. The boy of the Seven Wings just watches his former rival approach without showing any concern. Drawing his own blade firmly, the noble emphasizes the immense pride he has in his family's techniques. Pointing his weapon directly at the protagonist, he proposes a direct clash against the legendary magical miracle. A bright yellow aura envelops Nolan's body as he prepares for the awaited duel in the middle of the arena. Charging forward with his glowing sword, the noble demands they decide once and for all who the superior warrior is. Engulfed in red magic, Aster raises his dagger and says that decision will have to wait a bit. The blades collide violently, creating a huge crash and scattering sparks all over the arena. Caught off guard by the brutal force of the defense, Nolan's eyes widen, impressed by the impact. The knight is shocked to realize the protagonist's strength has completely changed from what it was before. Very confused, the noble questions if his opponent has already forgotten the strict rules of this test. Quickly moving away, he reminds him that only one team will be approved and that they both want to become knights. Getting into an attack stance again, the silver-haired man states the only option is to settle things with brute force right here. With a serene smile, the youngest closes his eyes and comments that this outcome would be a big problem for him. Walking towards his rival, our hero confesses that he also wants to see Nolan become a royal knight. The unexpected declaration leaves the warrior completely perplexed, not understanding what the boy means. Explaining the situation, Aster admits that after inciting all that rebellion, it would be very cruel to destroy his allies' dreams now. Emanating a confident aura, the protagonist reveals he has a perfect plan to guarantee the approval of everyone present. The audacity of that proposal leaves both Nolan and Gryan completely shocked in the middle of the courtyard. Smates breaks into a cold sweat, arguing it's humanly impossible to get all teams approved in an elimination test. Sheathing his dagger, the boy says he can't make any guarantees, but points out the idea will work if everyone cooperates. Then he calmly walks over to his cousin, who is still on his knees on the arena floor. Completely injured, the redhead lifts his face, showing genuine dread before the family's monster. Extending a friendly hand, Aster ironically proposes they make peace right there. Time passes, and the gray-haired inspector stares in shock at a mast with all three flags tied together. Furious at the bizarre scene, the man yells, asking if those boys don't even know how to hoist a flag properly. Maintaining his calm, the protagonist argues the rule only required control of 2 or more camps for victory. Since the regulations never forbade joint hoisting, the three teams formed a grand alliance to control the bases together. Getting in the rookie's face, the examiner indignantly asks if he wants everyone to pass and accuses him of turning the exam into a joke. Trembling with fear in the back, Gryan mutters that he knew this twisted logic would never be accepted by the academy. Screaming, the official questions if the boys would simply shake hands with their enemies if ordered to destroy them in a war. Unfazed by the shouting, the youngest drily replies that he would if the enemy were more useful alive than gone. The inspector loses his patience, stating that a knight is just the kingdom's sword and doesn't have the right to make that kind of decision. Clashing head-on, our hero asks if they'll be disqualified even without breaking any rules, accusing the man of acting out of pure ego. Cornered by the boy's brilliant argument, the experienced knight grinds his teeth in frustration, not knowing how to respond. Leaning in closer, Aster whispers in a threatening tone, reminding him of the political weight the situation involves. With a dark look, he implies the ducal family would never stay quiet if the exam failed their heir, because of a loophole in the rules. Completely defeated by the kid's perfect blackmail, the examiner lowers his head, letting out a groan of pure frustration. With no way out, the official decides to consult his superiors about the impasse, leaving the young men waiting for the decision for a full hour in the waiting room. The tense atmosphere takes over the room as one of the boys swings his boots, asking if they'll really be okay. Sitting on a bench, Smates confesses his fear that they'll all end up failing in the end. Leaning on the table, our hero tries to calm his allies, stating that at least they forced the administration to discuss the matter. Right behind him, the redhead cousin crosses his arms, turns his face, and lets out a grunt of pure contempt. Curious, the brute admits his surprise that Gryan agreed to cooperate and asks what the youngest said, to convince him. Displaying a terrifying smile, the protagonist sadistically assures him he didn't say much to the coward. Suddenly, the grand hall doors burst open with a crash as a guard demands everyone's attention. Immediately, the candidates look up, anxious to find out the Academy's final verdict. A high-ranking official enters the room imposingly, announcing the arrival of Director Mimir to reveal the results. Without wasting time, the young warriors rush to form a perfect line as a sign of absolute respect to the authorities. The director maintains a rigid and authoritarian posture, telling everyone to pay close attention to the words that will define their futures. Smates notices the man who just entered and asks, impressed, if that guy is really the director of the institution. The veteran comments that the official looks just like a regular old man. Soon, the protagonist tells him to have a little more respect. Stopping right in front of our hero, Director Mimir recognizes him immediately and confirms the boy's name. The man explains that approving such an absurd number of candidates at once is completely unprecedented there. He reveals they even suggested redoing the exam, but the other directors supported the rookie's idea and accepted their claim. Confused by the sudden response, Aster questions what exactly this decision means for them. Mimir maintains a calm and friendly posture in the face of the boy's genuine doubt. Clearly and directly, the official announces that absolutely everyone present is approved. The news explodes like a bomb in the hall, leaving the candidates thrilled with the surprise approval. The director demands the new students work hard, proving the academy didn't make a mistake with this bizarre exception. Smates bursts into tears of joy while our hero breathes a sigh of relief that his crazy plan worked. Turning his back, the man congratulates the group on their enrollment and gives them an official welcome to the Night Academy. Later that night, the tense atmosphere gives way to a well-deserved rest in the school's luxurious hot springs. Soaking in the hot water, the veteran celebrates excitedly, praising the delicious food and the huge size of the tubs. One of the allies agrees enthusiastically, remembering they're only enjoying all this thanks to the protagonist. Our hero scratches his head, a little embarrassed by all the sudden attention from his new comrades. The soldiers remain impressed that he saved everyone's skin, vowing to follow him as their new boss forever. Nolan grumbles, calling the group opportunists, pointing out that just a while ago they were Gryan's lackeys, and says he won't be giving thanks. Soon, one of the boys teases Nolan, reminding him he lost the fight. However, the noble retorts that he merely accepted a draw. Finding the useless argument amusing, Aster assures them the details don't matter, since they challenged the main house and are now students. With a determined look, the boy states that these small victories will turn into a gigantic wave to crush the ducal family. He officially declares that it is at this exact moment and place that their great rebellion truly begins. Just then, the young man remembers his sisters and focuses on Alphen, deducing that as a veteran, she will surely be a strong ally here. Focused on the big goal, our hero decrees that their arduous training at the Night Academy begins the next day. Getting out of the water, he reflects that the first real mission will be getting used to the heavy routine of this place. However, the boy stops suddenly upon noticing a very strange movement behind him. A huge group of recruits gathers bizarrely, trying to focus their vision on the boy's magical mark. Completely caught off guard, Aster jumps back, demanding to know what the heck they're trying to do. His allies excitedly explain that the living seven wings are a good luck charm, hoping to get some divine blessing if they pray to it. Annoyed and amused by this madness, the youngest yells at them to stop, assuring them that kind of thing doesn't work. Nolan watches the whole commotion from a distance, maintaining a more reserved posture as the shouting takes over the bath. Observing the moon through the window, the young noble sighs heavily, already dreading the headache that awaits him in the future. Far away in the main mansion, Helen stares at the courtyard and states she's utterly disappointed with Gryan's failure. The matriarch shows her fury as she comments that she heard about the rookie's vow of destruction against the ducal house. She questions how the boy had the nerve to just stand there after suffering such an unforgivable insult. Desperate on the floor, Gryan apologizes and promises to fix his grave mistake next time to meet her expectations. But before he can finish his pathetic excuse, a merciless kick hits him square in the face with great violence. Lillian interrupts the apology, screaming, assuring him there will be no next time for a useless piece of trash. The strong impact throws the coward far down the dark corridor as his aggressor calls him scum. The Lord advances furiously, stating he should be turned into monster feed, comparing him to the late loser Darius. Stomping on her own brother's head without mercy, she listens to him beg for mercy in a completely miserable way. Overcome with pure disgust, Lillian delivers a sequence of brutal kicks to her relative's fallen body. Gryan groans in pain, enduring the beating in silence as the blows drive his stomach into the stone floor. Bleeding heavily, the redhead curses Aster in his thoughts, blaming the rookie for all this humiliating punishment. The memory of the seven-winged boy comes to the loser's mind, recalling when he was forced to cooperate to avoid leaving empty-handed. Our hero had warned about the real danger Grian would face if the family leader found out about his defeat. With a cold look, Aster guaranteed the Duke would surely have him taken out if he knew about his unforgivable failure. The redhead froze in terror upon hearing that truth, feeling the weight of his end hanging right over his head. Reinforcing the blackmail, the youngest described the other cousin's final moments, calling his demise a terrible sight. Leaning in close, the protagonist whispered very threateningly that it was not a dignified way to go. Dominating the situation, our hero told him to cooperate if he didn't want to meet the same pathetic end as in that dungeon. As a reward for his obedience, Aster offered a truce to ensure his relative's survival in the exam. Back in the grim present, Helen intervenes in the brutal beating, ordering Lillian to stop and spare the boy's life. Lying in a pool of his own blood, Grian sobs in pain as an arrogant voice mocks his depressing state. Julius appears in the room, cynically stating they need to forgive their cute little brother since they're family. Caressing Alphen's hair, the psychopathic lord agrees that family has to get along and asks for her opinion. The young woman just keeps her head down and her eyes wide, paralyzed by the terror of that sick situation. Julius recalls that the image of the house's absolute dominance has always been essential to keep the knights completely in line. Lillian listens attentively to the warning that this respect is crumbling with the sudden emergence of the Seven Wings. With very cruel intentions, the psychopath decrees that it's the two girls' mission to remind the world who really calls the shots. Lillian agrees immediately, angrily stating they will prove the main lineage is not just for show. Displaying a macabre smile, Julius tells his sister to show the youngest the true and absolute meaning of the word violence. The next day, all the freshmen gather in formation in the academy's enormous courtyard under the bright sunlight. One of the instructors takes the lead, congratulating the group on their chance to begin the path to the glorious Royal Knights. He emphasizes that this elite military force must crush any opponent, demanding absolute perfection in combat and strategy. Banging on the lectern, the veteran warns that all recruits aspiring to this position must prove themselves incredibly special. To illustrate his point, the official's hand glows intensely as he concentrates a dense magical aura in front of everyone. A quick slash cuts through the air, manifesting a sword of pure green energy, impressing the present students. The instructor explains that the system divides students into 6 different levels, defining missions based on personal skill. He warns that being powerful guarantees learning secret techniques, calling common swordsmen complete mediocrities. The energy blade tears through the wind once more, proving that raw dexterity is just the tip of the iceberg in war. Moving at an imperceptible speed, the official states that those who can only manipulate magic are also second-rate. Nolan watches the display of force with great interest, aware that this is the true level he needs to reach. Aster focuses on the instructor's words that only the perfect fusion of magic and steel makes a knight truly lethal. A colossal eruption of power devastates everyone's vision as the man shouts that proving one's own strength is the only freedom there. It all continues in the training courtyard with the instructor, challenging the students to prove their worth. Without wasting time, Aster charges forward and delivers a powerful blow enveloped in an intense purple magical aura. With extreme ease, he slices through an entire magical iron pillar and cheerfully states that everything's good. Amused, the official points to the damage and tells the other recruits to try and reach that level. The protagonist simply sheathes his blade and walks away from the center of the arena with a completely calm posture. Watching from the balcony, 2 veteran nobles are impressed by the rookie's absurd talent. One of them analyzes the severed pillar, confirming the boy is undeniably special for destroying that rigid material. However, his blonde partner warns that the potential of the 7 Wings goes far beyond that, and that the youngest will end up being devoured. He warns that the real danger are the merciless monsters already hiding within the academy. The image of Julius brutally stomping on Grian's head appears to illustrate this grim threat. Now in the castle corridors, our hero observes the landscape through the window, while reflecting on the ranking system. Holding his card, Smates complains that even after passing the exam, the institution keeps testing everyone relentlessly. The veteran laments the situation, remembering that our hero and Nolan were the only ones not to start at rank 6. Staring at his own lower-level plate, the brute frustratedly admits he already expected to be left behind. To cheer up his ally, Aster shows his level 4 pass and reminds him that everyone will need to reach rank 2 in the future. Joking about the pressure, the brute calls the protagonist boss and says he's too strict. Caught off guard by the unusual title, the boy is completely confused, not understanding the joke. Smates approaches worried and asks if the rookie has already forgotten the big promise he made. The memory of the declaration of war surfaces as the soldier remembers our hero vowed to crush the ducal house. His partner reveals that many there took those words seriously, expecting him to change their reality. With great loyalty, the veteran asks the leader to trust them and let the group help carry this burden. Patting the boy on the shoulder, he celebrates excitedly, inviting him to destroy the enemy family together. Inspired by the support, the youngest cracks a smile, agreeing he needs to get stronger to protect his allies. With a focused gaze, Aster accepts the weight of his own promise, aware that he'll need a lot of strength to win. Cutting the serious mood, the young man decrees that the absolute priority right now is to fill their stomachs. He explains they won't last the afternoon training on an empty stomach. But Smates finds the crowd blocking the hallway strange. Nearing the cafeteria, the other students desperately warn them that the main family has just invaded the place. Sitting comfortably and eating a piece of bread, the psychopath Julius mockingly asks if this is the famous Aster. The protagonist's face darkens with irritation as the sadist says he got tired of waiting and decided to eat first. Displaying pure arrogance, the noble rests his feet on the table and cynically calls the boy his younger brother. Staring at the intruders, Aster immediately deduces the scoundrel's identity as the other students confirm the rumor. The cruel boy is Julius, second in line for the ducal lineage's succession, accompanied by his dangerous sister Lilian. The two heirs are famous throughout the kingdom for being the most sadistic and relentless tyrants in the entire family. Breaking into a cold sweat at the revelation, the protagonist confesses he had completely forgotten about their presence at the academy. Stomping on a masked recruit's head, Lilian compliments the youngest's face and mocks the ugliness of the fallen boy. Agonizing on the cafeteria floor, the victim with his head trapped in metal groans in pain, unable to defend himself. Startled by the bizarre scene, the brute questions the meaning of that grotesque and plain helmet. Our hero immediately recognizes the grim object, revealing it to be the infamous iron shackle. Terrified, his ally explains it's a torture device used by the big shots to punish severe failures. Pulling the victim by his clothes, Julius scoffs at all this knowledge coming from a member of a lesser branch. Sitting on the subjugated boy, the psychopath criticizes the fact that his relative carries their name and falls to rank 6. Gripping the metal firmly, the noble cynically laments how pathetic the defeated one's story has become. Smirking, the tyrant claims he gave the object as a gift to encourage his little brother to try harder. The sight of several other students wearing the same device illustrates the cruel method of basic reward for food. The sadist concludes that anyone works to exhaustion when they realize they'll suffocate if they don't take off the mask. Noticing several other imprisoned recruits in the cafeteria, Smates panics at this collective torture. Maintaining his pose, Julius points out that everyone there has hungry eyes and tells the rookies to greet the veterans. Then, the psychopath touches the shoulder of a gagged redhead girl, asking her to show her face without shame. Slow footsteps echo through the hall as the cynical noble comments that it's been a long time since their last meeting. The young woman walks to the front of the crowd, leaving the protagonist completely stunned by what he just saw. The youngest's eyes widen in pure shock, refusing to believe the blatant cruelty before him. Opening his arms mockingly, the heir ironically asks if his older sister doesn't look like a different person. Completely submissive and wearing the iron shackle, Alphen awaits orders in silence, confirming the worst of his suspicions. Consumed by immediate desperation, the boy loses his composure and screams the young woman's name with all his might. Staring at the floor, the girl shows a deep sadness behind the torturous helmet that traps her face. The sight of his injured relative awakens an uncontrollable fury in our hero, who grits his teeth, overflowing with hatred. In a lethal reflex, he draws his combat dagger at a frightening speed to immediately start the attack. Charging like a wild animal, Aster curses the tyrant, calling him a scoundrel, and demands to know what he did to the young woman. Suddenly, an iron mask clatters onto the stone floor, making a loud metallic noise near the commotion. Completely calm in the face of the murderous outburst, the sadistic lord just tells the freshman to calm his nerves. The torture device rolls across the floor, stopping right next to the fallen relative's injured face. The youngest halts his lethal charge upon hearing the villain declare that he made sure to prepare enough for everyone. Stomping on the coward, Julius displays a mountain of metal shackles and summons the freshman to a fun party. Brutally tossing the freshman from side to side, the masked guards spread chaos through the cafeteria at the sadist's command. With an evil smile on his face, Julius warns that whoever wants to eat a decent meal today will have to wear the iron mask. Showing absolutely no pity, the upperclassmen drag the students across the floor, forcibly shoving that torture equipment onto their faces. Smates desperately tries to defend himself while shouting that the situation there is way too ugly. Right beside him, Nolan crosses swords with an enemy, immediately noticing that these upperclassmen are the Academy's elite. The blonde quickly realizes that the power level of these guys is absolutely absurd for a place like that. Agonized by the pressure, the big guy cries for help, asking his ally what the hell they are supposed to do now. Overflowing with a monstrous red aura, Aster wields his sword, consumed by pure fury. In this massacre, like atmosphere, our MC walks right through the middle of the courtyard, ignoring the commotion. Even the bystanders around them freeze in fear, realizing that the newbie's magical pressure is completely insane. Staring the villain right in the eyes, our boy asks in a cold tone what exactly that bastard is trying to do. Keeping his cynical pose, Julius raises his hand and mockingly asks his little cousin not to get so nervous. To provoke him even further, the Lord calls the hero's friends trash, who only passed the exam by pure luck. Sitting on his improvised throne, the tyrant grumbles that the quality of this year's freshman is just pathetic. Right behind him, Lillian arrogantly agrees, guaranteeing that she would never let this bunch of weaklings slip by. Swinging another iron shackle in the air, the psychopath warns that he'll take care of everyone in the traditional Elheim family way. Suddenly, the villainess notices a lethal movement down below. Having no patience for speeches, our MC orders the two to take that vulgar thing out of his sister's mouth right now. Flying at the enemy, he unleashes an all-out attack, prepared to slice the sadist up. But the murderous intent sparks in the air when Lillian intercepts the strike head-on, protecting her little brother. At that exact moment, the girl mocks the newbie, telling him not to hold such silly grudges in his heart. Using brute force, Aster presses his weapon forward, forcing the enemy back in a clash of scarlet magic. Laughing at the situation, Julius guarantees that Alphen is there wearing the torture mask of her own free will. To make matters worse, the psychopath points at the gagged young woman, asking her to confirm the lie in front of everyone. Lillian lets out a little giggle, provoking the newbie by saying his older brother is just too mean. Faced with his injured relative, the hero clenches his teeth, remembering that their mother was always worried about this cruelty. Swiftly, the wicked girl advances in a heavy counterattack, but meets the impenetrable defense of the red relic. With a deafening crash, the blades collide in an insane flash, proving that the upperclassman's rank is no joke. Except, right in the middle of the exchange, the boy notices a white blur jumping straight at him. Out of pure reflex, he dodges an almost fatal cut and is shocked to see that Alphen herself tried to attack him. Taking advantage of the opening, Nolan leaps into combat, shouting that he'll take care of the arrogant lord. From the top of the table, Julius fires a blast of flames, saying he feels disgusted that someone like the blonde calls himself a knight. From behind his steel defense, the ally tells the villain to stand up and fight like a real man. Consumed by flames, the psychopath charges through the air, promising to carve the family's style into his opponent's skin. In an act of pure brutality, the tyrant grabs the silver-haired guy's blade with his own bare, burning hand. Exploding into a pyre of absolute power, Julius declares that the blonde is dead wrong about what strength is. In that instant, the heat becomes unbearable, making Nolan's weapon melt under the monstrous magic. With his skin melting, the warrior retreats, feeling the danger of being so close to that human furnace. Smiling like a maniac, the villain shouts at the top of his lungs that the strongest guy of all is always the most badass. In response, a devastating explosion sweeps the courtyard, throwing the silver-haired guy back like a rag doll. Desperate at the scene, Smates runs to help his partner amidst the smoke. Fallen and covered in burns, Nolan coughs up blood, showing that the impact was incredibly heavy. Filled with hate, the big guy curses the nobility and swears he's going to smash that arrogant sadist's face. Noticing the little soldier's rebellion, Lillian turns her face, finding that audacity quite curious. All excited, the witch gives a sick smile and says she'll make an exception to keep the bearded guy as a pet. Stepping through the fire, Julius decrees that being weak is a deadly sin, and that saying whatever you want is a privilege of the strong. Aster finally composes himself and gives it right back, saying the villain loves to cowardly abuse that power. While the henchmen continue suffocating the freshmen at the back of the cafeteria, Chiaz reigns unchecked. Grabbing a student by the head, the Lord adds that the weak always end up swallowed by someone bigger. Ready to kill, the psychopath mockingly asks which way our boy's future lies. With his eyes shining with fury, Aster agrees with the rule of the strong and calls him to the slaughter without fear. Accumulating an absurd density of mana, the MC fires a scarlet comet, destroying everything in its path. Caught by surprise, Julius is dragged backward, trying to hold back the lethal shockwave with his arms. Without giving him even a second to breathe, the youngest brother keeps up the pressure, forcing the magical attack at maximum strength. Engulfed by the attack, the sadistic hare lets out a roar of pain, feeling his own flesh truly burning. Smates vibrates with joy, shouting the boss's name, thinking that victory is already guaranteed. However, the dust settles and Julius appears intact amidst the fire, calling the power of the seven wings a pure disappointment. Completely bored, the madman confesses that he expected a little more usefulness from this famous miracle. Deflecting the red blade with just one abrupt movement, the Lord breaks the hero's offensive stance. Furious, the villain warns his little cousin not to get so full of himself just because he landed a lucky little strike. Using speed to his advantage, Aster spins on his own axis, creating a hurricane of pure destructive energy. Completely in shock, the sadist's eyes widen as he realizes he fell for a perfect combat trick. It soon dawns on the hare, who who understands that the newbie gathered the scattered magic to focus it on a single point. With an absurd impact, the tornado violently hurls Julius against the hall's stone wall. Back on the ground, our MC grumbles that his opponent was blabbering too much during the fight. Sheathing his dagger, the boy shamelessly admits that he didn't even pay attention to the villain's speech. Turning his face to the ceiling, the hero cynically asks him to repeat his catchphrase one more time. Hidden amidst the smoke and rubble, the tyrant's dark gaze shines with pure murderous hatred. Aster puts his hand on the back of his neck, feigning innocence, and throws out the bait by asking if it wasn't anything important. Next to the wounded Nolan, the big guy lets out a sigh of relief, impressed by the absurd damage done by the boss. Even Lillian loses her bad girl composure, astounded to see that the bastard actually took down her brother. Emerging from the rubble, Julius gets up from the heavy stones, complaining that the hit actually hurt. Dusting off his fancy clothes, the Lord laughs, challenging the youngest to try and scratch the sacred emblem of the wings. Overcome with dread, Smates despairs upon realizing that the monster is still full of energy even after that blow. All the witch's worry vanishes, and she breaks into a sadistic smirk, realizing the lethal battle is only just beginning. With a mocking tone, the witch points her finger and calls her brother pathetic for taking a beating from the newbie. Planted in the ground, the dagger shines as a lethal tension takes over the hall. Consumed by fury, the psychoth roars the youngest brother's name, engulfed in a sea of burning flames. Maintaining his composure, our MC doesn't even blink and remains isolated in his scarlet magic. Without a second thought, the villain charges with a massive fire attack, ready to kill. Using brute force, the boy holds back the impact with his glowing blade and tells the sadist to stop stalling. In a colossal clash, the two energies collide, sending sparks flying everywhere in the cafeteria. Suddenly, a mysterious force separates the two warriors right in the middle of their open brawl. Out of nowhere, Count Maze interrupts the fight, sporting a cynical smile on his face. Resting his sword on his shoulder, the director announces that he has no choice but to intervene in this mess. Annoyed by the intrusion, the psychopath tells the Lord to back off and stay out of his business. But with total calmness, the blue-haired man simply waves his hand, dismissing the threat. Surrounded by fire, the hare listens as the director warns that putting on a little show like this looks very bad for the family's image. Right after, the Lord politely asks the student to put his weapon away and end the scene right there. Realizing he's lost his footing, the villain clicks his tongue in frustration and decides to lower his guard. With his blade sheathed, the psychopath grumbles that they completely killed his vibe. Turning his back, the tyrant summons his henchmen and announces that the welcome party is over for today. Trying to go after the bastard, our hero takes a step forward, but ends up being restrained by the director. Squeezing the boy's arm, the Lord whispers a very direct apology. In a serious tone, the blue-haired man asks the newbie to back down and save his reputation for the moment. Over his shoulder, our MC focuses on the sad figure of his sister trapped in the iron mask. With her head bowed, the girl looks away, lacking the courage to face her youngest brother. Alone in the hall, the hero stares at the torture equipment on the floor with a heavy expression. Now in the comfort of the office, the Lord sits in his armchair while the MC curses Julius, calling him a crazy monster. Remembering the damage, the boy comments that even his blonde teammate ended up knocked out and bandaged. To make matters worse, the witch took his other allies away as prisoners with those bizarre shackles on their faces. Worried about the future, Smates crosses his arms and asks what their next step will be. Glaring daggers at the director, our boy claims he would have solved everything if he hadn't been interrupted. Desperate, the big guy scolds his boss, demanding more respect for their superior, while the Lord just laughs. With an ironic smile, the blue-haired man lays his cards on the table and asks where their relationship stands. Suspicious, our MC keeps a scowl, trying to read the bigwig's true intentions. Memories of the cruel trial at the main house surface, proving that this noble was his only ally there. Even so, our hero mentally confesses that he can't figure out if the guy is truly a friend or an enemy. Breaking the silence, the veteran approaches the Lord, wanting to better understand the rules of that place. Outraged by the injustice, the soldier questions if the administration is really going to let this tyranny run rampant. Resting his chin on his hand, the director reminds them that he is also part of the ducal house's administration. Holding the iron helmet, the young man deduces that locking up students isn't seen as a serious problem in there. With total nonchalance, the Lord explains that the academy judges everything based on pure merit. Justifying the psychopath's madness, the man argues that his sadistic methods make the recruits grow stronger. Getting the message, our MC lowers his head, realizing he can't rely on anyone in there. Just about to leave the office, he hears a tense warning about trying to rescue his allies straight from the source. With a dark look, the director warns that the main family monitors every step taken inside the institution. Under the tyrant's looming shadow, the Lord warns that any poorly executed rebellion results in immediate expulsion. Standing at the door, the youngest glares at his superior, guaranteeing that this is no reason to abandon his comrades. Squeezing the iron tightly, he declares that the issue goes much deeper, and it isn't just about blind justice. Agonizing images of suffering students invade his mind, proving that those shackles destroy people's hearts. Soon these recruits become obedient tools with no will to leave or fight. Seeing the boy's fury, the Lord questions if he has ever felt the true terror of that equipment up close. With a sinister smile, our MC confirms he knows full well the fate of those who become a lost cause like that. Side by side with his bearded ally, he swears he will never let his friends meet such a miserable end. Intrigued by his unshakable determination, the director crosses his arms, analyzing the boy with great interest. With a slight smirk, the Lord finally seems to approve of the newbie's rebellious stance. With the utmost calm, the hero confesses that he isn't keen on getting expelled for nothing either. Curious about the answer, the blue-haired noble asks if the youngest has some crazy plan in mind. To the sound of metal being crushed in his hand, our MC prepares his trump card. With his eyes shining with malice, the boy decrees that he is going to solve this problem his own way.